Chapter 1067, The Eternity Sky Emperor Arrives. This time, the whole truth was out. Everything was now linked, and there was a perfect explanation. But, the problem was still very serious because Ling Han had not managed to stop the progress of the blood sacrifice, and the Chang clan was still going on as they had planned. Tomorrow, the Eternity Sky Emperor would arrive personally, and collect the 9-demon sword. This was a level 13 god tool, at least. If it actually burst out its might, killing a heavenly body tier elite would be child's play. The Eternity Sky Majestic Empire would take over the entire Joint Peace planet, and no one would be able to stand against them. No wonder they were so deranged, and performed such a large-scale blood sacrifice. It was because once they obtained the 9-demon sword, they would become invincible. By then, what need would they have to consider the critique of others? Ling Han was slightly anxious, but he did not have any idea what to do at all. Now that the 9 Flames Heavenly King was standing guard here, if he went out, that would be a path straight to death. There was absolutely no second possibility. My only hope is Empress Luan Xing as well as the Absolute Beginning Stone. It can absorb all attacks, and can stand against even a divine sword on the level of the Eternal River tier. However, the Absolute Beginning Stone is so small, so there is a limit to the vital points that it can shield. She would still be at a massive disadvantage. What to do now? Ling Han scrambled his brains, but in the face of absolute power, any kind of plan would appear to pale in comparison, and so he was helpless. The 9 Flames Heavenly King only needed to send out a palm strike, and everything would be over. Time passed rapidly, and the blood sacrifices were still continuing. Copious amounts of life energy and vitality were absorbed by the altar, wearing away at the air of violence from the 9-demon sword. By the second day, it could be clearly felt that this altar was filled with an air of violence. This was not a bad thing. On the other hand, this was a sign that the blood sacrifice was about to succeed. That was because the air of violence from within the 9-demon sword had been forced out, and what would come next was that it would flourish the most before rapidly declining. Ah! By this time, the 9-demon sword was already exhibiting its frightening might. One after another, swords light flew out of the blood lake, easily destroying the prison cells inside the altar. As the sword light slashed past, blood and flesh flew in all directions. The might of this sword's light had already reached the level of the heavenly body tier. Putting aside those prisoners that had had their cultivation restricted, even those guards were no match for it. If they were actually hit, it meant definite death. They would be directly turned into pieces, unable to leave behind even a complete body. The 9 Flames Heavenly King, on the other hand, was not shocked, but rather pleased. Laughing loudly, he exclaimed, as expected of our ancestors' spirit tool. It is really too powerful and strong. It obviously has yet to awaken, and there is even only a sword's hilt left behind, but already possesses such might. After we collect it, its might would reach pseudo-eternal river tier, at the very least. Then, when we completely combine it with the divine sword, it would not be difficult to kill a low-level eternal river tier elite. He was so pleased that he had revealed a considerable number of secrets. Firstly, this god tool was not complete, but rather had been broken. Secondly, the 9-demon sword should have been broken up into quite a number of parts, and what was buried here was the sword hilt. Thirdly, the Chang clan should have obtained information about the location of the other broken parts of the divine sword. This also meant that this altar was not the only one in existence. Ling Han's heart beat madly. The problem now was that the Eternity Sky Emperor had not gone to collect the other parts of the 9-demon sword first. Otherwise, his current battle prowess could have possibly leaped into pseudo-eternal river tier. This was invincible power on the Joint Peace planet. Sword light flashed out in gradually quicker succession, and even the 9 Flames Heavenly King did not dare continue to stay here. It was not that he could not defend against such might, but rather doing so was not worth it. He would just be wasting his stamina, and with how closely the sword's light was flashing out, the whole altar would soon be destroyed, so he would no longer need to consider the problem of Ling Han stirring the waters any further. He was sure that if the latter was still inside the altar, he would definitely be killed by the might of the god tool. If he still managed to survive from that, that would be really too illogical. Long. Finally, the altar that was as tall as a mountain crumbled, and turned into ruins. However, sword light was still asterisk, and slashed towards the heavens, tearing apart the skies itself, its terrifying might on full display. Now was the most violent time for the Nine Demon Sword. Xiao, in the distance, a figure streaked through the air. He was of sturdy build, and also had a long cloak billowing behind him. However, it was bright crimson, and fluttered wildly in the air. There were similarly 9 black-colored balls of light behind his back, but they were not flames, as they were so black that they seemed rather eerie. Imperial brother. The 9 Flames Heavenly King rushed up to greet him. The Eternity Sky Emperor, one of the 3 greatest overlords of the Joint Peace Planet. There was a chaotic air entwining his whole body, and his features could not be clearly distinguished. It seemed like his features were constantly changing, but whoever took a look at him would definitely be able to recognize him on their next meeting. This was a unique bearing, just like how Empress Quashing had one. It was obvious that not many had even glimpsed her true face, yet they would definitely not mix her up with any other women. The Eternity Sky Emperor stopped, his tall figure seemingly capable of supporting the sky itself. In front of him, even the heaven and earth seemed so small in comparison. His eyes swept over, and he said, "Very good. The air of violence inside the 9 Demons' sword has been completely released. This is the ancestral spirit tool of our Chang clan, and has an unbreakable link with the bloodline of our Chang clan. Later, I shall collect it with a secret technique, and success would be mostly assured. Congratulations, Imperial brother." The 9 Flames Heavenly King laughed loudly. The sword's hilt is the easiest to collect. In the future, after we collect the remaining 3 segments of the sword's blade, we will be able to let our ancestral weapon shine with its supreme brilliance once more. But, Imperial brother, the 9 Demons' sword has been buried for millions and millions of years. Furthermore, it is an extremely ferocious object in the first place, and now, its air of violence is sky-high. Even if we have a link through our bloodline, Imperial brother should still not be too careless. The Eternity Sky Emperor laughed loudly, and exclaimed, "Of course, I know." A proud expression appeared on his face as he then said, "When I will have collected the 9 Demons' sword, I will sweep aside the Jade Drop and conquer the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire. After that, I shall take Empress Quashing into my imperial harem." Right, so after all the trouble, it was still for the sake of obtaining Empress Quashing. Although he was full of great goals and magnificent aspirations, wanting to conquer the other great majestic empires and unite the entire Joint Peace Planet, his last words had still revealed his true nature. He was filled with longing for Empress Quashing. However, even this supreme overlord was so captivated by Empress Quashing that his lifetime goal was to take her into his imperial harem, showing how charismatic this Empress Quashing truly was. A guy that will bear sons without behinds. Ling cursed internally, but the present him could only watch helplessly, and could not do anything at all. This kind of helplessness made him feel very displeased. It is time for our feud with the Jade Drop Majestic Empire to be resolved completely. The 9 Flames Heavenly King revealed a sinister killing intent. That's right. The Eternity Sky Emperor humphed, a similar killing intent burning in his eyes. Sword light filled the air, endless and boundless. The air of violence endlessly condensed, and was then dispersed. At this instant, it had reached its maximum. Finally, it transformed into a colossal human figure, focusing on the Eternity Sky Emperor and the 9 Flames Heavenly King. "Imperial brother, just leave this guy to me. You go and collect the 9 Demons' sword," the 9 Flames Heavenly King declared heroically. "All right," the Eternity Sky Emperor shouted, and pressed a palm directly where the altar was among the ruins. Origin power condensed, and formed a huge palm about the size of a mountain. Leveling up, it dug out a large amount of loose dirt. When the giant-sized humanoid aura figure saw this, it immediately slammed down with its fist, bringing with it a frightening attack to the divine sense. "Your opponent is me. The Nine Flames Heavenly King headed skywards to intercept this attack. Chapter 1068, Collecting the Sword. Let's take advantage of this chance. Let's quickly leave, the small dog suggested. No, let's observe first and see how truly powerful this nine-demon sword actually is. Ling Han shook his head. The Eternity Sky Emperor was digging there, temporarily, there was no big movement. Meanwhile, the Nine Flames Heavenly King was already engaged in an incredibly fierce battle with the giant aura figure. This giant humanoid was a few hundred meters tall, its abilities frighteningly powerful. Even if there were a few thousand or tens of thousands of Sun-Moon tier cultivators, they would probably be insta-killed at the same time with one spiritual attack. Faced with this kind of great enemy, even the Nine Flames Heavenly King dared not be the slightest bit careless. Divine flame was burning all over his body, and it was as if he had become a god of fire. He was known as the Nine Flames Heavenly King, and his flames had a total of 9 colors. Every color represented a different ability that he could use. For example, the white-colored flame was the weakest, and if the color finally reached black, that meant that he was using his full power. Of course, summoning even the white flames meant that he had gotten serious. However, if he had summoned black flames, it would place a colossal burden on him. It was definitely impossible to maintain it for too long. Now, he was channeling green flames. This was the 5th color, which meant what he was treating this giant as a great enemy. But after only a while, the Nine Flames Heavenly King was compelled to summon blue flames. This was his 6th color. The giant aura figure did not have any vital points. It was formed out of violence and bloodthirst in the first place, so even if the attack it received was far above its own level, it would only turn into mist form. It merely needed to reform itself. However, its spiritual attack was incredibly terrifying. That was really something that could result in the death of a heavenly body tier elite if he was the slightest bit careless. The Nine Flames Heavenly King needed to use the divine flames to protect himself and refine the spiritual attacks heading his way. This was a collision of martial intent. Thankfully, the air of violence was in the end merely formed from the power seeping out of the god tool. Hence, there was a limit to its might. The Nine Flames Heavenly King was an actual living person, with endless power at his command. Thus, he merely needed to stabilize himself, and there would be nothing left to fear. Boom! 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 The Eternity Sky Emperor endlessly dug up the earth. Where the altar had once been, there appeared an extremely deep pit. Theoretically, since the Nine Demons' sword was buried here, its air of violence should be sky-high by now. Yet, it was incomparably calm, like it was extremely ordinary underground and there was nothing special about it. Shwa! When the Eternity Sky Emperor dug to a certain depth, a brilliant sword light suddenly shot upwards. It was as bright as a rising sun, and the heaven and earth became incredibly bright all of a sudden, almost enough to blind someone's eyes. It's finally out. Yet the Eternity Sky Emperor cracked a grin. He stretched out a large hand, and grabbed at that sword light. His large palm of origin power condensed, and this sword light was forcibly extinguished. The heaven and earth immediately returned to their original brightness. Wang, a broken sword floated up from deep within the earth. It looked very ordinary, and only the sword's hilt was left behind. The broken blade was less than 1/8 of the normal length of a sword. However, endless aura of dominance spread out from this broken sword. It was like a supreme elite had descended, and all common people could only kneel in submission in its presence. And in front of this broken sword, even elites of the heavenly body tier could only be considered to belong to the category of common people. The Eternity Sky Emperor was pleasantly surprised. He joined his right index and middle fingers together and drew a line across his left wrist. Instantly, blood gushed out. Every drop of blood was as sparkling and translucent as a pearl, extremely rich. This was a real divine medicine from blood and flesh. One drop of blood from a heavenly body tier elite would be enough to raise one's cultivation level greatly if a mountain river tier cultivator could refine it. At the very least, the advancement of a sub-minor level was definitely nothing difficult. Unfortunately, this kind of treasured medicine was absolutely not something a mountain river tier cultivator could bear. Whoever drank it would die, as his body would burst with how potent it was. 9 Demon Sword, you are originally the ancestral weapon of our Chang clan. Now I am here, so quickly return to us, the Eternity Sky Emperor shouted loudly as he sprinkled his blood. Every drop of blood transformed into a huge mountain that crashed towards the 9 Demon Sword. The 9 Demon Sword seemed to be attracted by this fresh blood, and actually did not resist. Instantly, the fresh blood wrapped around it. The Eternity Sky Emperor was ecstatic. As long as the link through his bloodline was established, he would be able to collect this treasured weapon. It was in that short instant that all the blood was absorbed by the 9 Demon Sword. This treasured sword seemed to have a life of its own. One after another, streaks of light flashed onto the sword's blade as if it was breathing. It floated in the skies peacefully, its might reserved. Was it subdued just like that? Ling Han watched with clenched teeth. After the Eternity Sky Emperor obtained this divine sword, who could stop his steps in this world? Would anyone like that still exist? The Eternity Sky Emperor laughed loudly, and flew towards the 9 Demon Sword. He stretched out his hand to grab the sword's hilt. If it was any other person, even if it was an elite at the peak stage of the heavenly body tier, he could not possibly collect the 9 Demon Sword, because its level was too high. Whoever had that idea would only be seeking his own doom. He was different, though. As a descendant of the Chang clan, the blood flowing inside his body was of the same roots as the blood that had been melded into the 9 Demon Sword upon its creation. The tips of his fingers had already come in contact with the sword's hilt. The smile on the Eternity Sky Emperor's face widened. But just at this moment, a sudden change occurred. The 9 Demon Sword shook, and slashed out with a flash of sword light. It transformed into a massive blade thousands of meters long and slashed out towards the Eternity Sky Emperor. This attack was incredibly sudden. Thankfully, the Eternity Sky Emperor was an elite of the heavenly body tier himself, and he had long since known that the 9 Demon Sword's might was extraordinary. Naturally, he could not possibly be careless. Therefore, his hands immediately formed claws and pressed down on the sword light. Sword light swept past. Pooh! The huge claws the Eternity Sky Emperor had shot out were immediately shattered. He grunted and retreated 100 miles. When he raised his hands, he saw that a bloody mark had appeared on both his palms. Although the 9 Demon Sword had shattered the palms that he had formed out of origin power, the air of violence of this sword was really too terrifying. Sword chi swept forth unhindered, biting back at his own body. Yet the Eternity Sky Emperor laughed loudly. This was the 9 Demon Sword that he'd anticipated. Only this kind of might was what he needed. If it was not as powerful as this, how would he be able to use it to defeat the Jade Drop Emperor and Empress Quashing? Shua, the 9 Demon Sword exhibited its divine might, sending out slashes of sword light one after another. It was really too powerful. Even the Eternity Sky Emperor would be subdued and land in a disadvantageous position. Ha ha ha, still so powerful even with suppression from the bloodline. Then, in my hands, what kind of might would it be able to display? The Eternity Sky Emperor laughed loudly. I am even more expectant now. 9 Demon Sword, are you still unwilling to submit to me? I am the son of heaven, and destined by the heavens. I am the descendant of the Chang clan, your destined master. The 9 Demon Sword was naturally not capable of replying. Its sword light interwove together, becoming more and more violent. This was a sword of violence, and had a very strong killing intent. Even if he was a descendant of the Chang clan, so what? It only desired fresh blood. The Eternity Sky Emperor used a powerful move. 4 heavenly bodies appeared at the same time, and waves of chaotic aura surged out. It was as if he was a saint capable of splitting heaven and earth apart. The heaven trembled, and the earth shook. Divine light interwove together. Ling Han could no longer see the scene in the skies at all. He only felt multiple terrifying surges of power roll over him. The earth itself had shattered, and space was tearing apart. In the Black Tower, he was endlessly rolling around along with the movement of the flying dirt. Finally, he saw that the Eternity Sky Emperor had transformed into a giant that was thousands of meters high. The 9 balls of light had transformed into huge stars, forming a circle of light, wielded in the hand of the Eternity Sky Emperor and used as a weapon. A broken arm shot skywards, and then fell back down. Blood splattered all over in the air. The 9 demons' sword did not have an arm. Chapter 1069, Obtaining the Sword. Ling Han was stunned. That was the Eternity Sky Emperor, one of the 3 supreme leaders of the Joint Peace Planet. Yet one of his arms had actually been sliced off. One had to realize that this 9 demons' sword was a god tool handed down by the ancestors of the Chang clan. This meant that it was of the same lineage as the cultivation technique that their clan practiced. However, even with this link between them, the Eternity Sky Emperor still had one of his arms sliced off. It was abundantly clear just how powerful this 9 demons' sword was. If he were to obtain it, would Empress Quashing still be a match for him? There was every possibility that she would be snatched by him and become his concubine. Ling Han couldn't help but feel extremely set off upon thinking of this possibility. He knew that his emotions were being affected by the Empress' tremendous charm, yet even so, he was still repulsed by the thought of her being snatched by another man. He didn't want to see Empress Quashing falling into the embrace of any other man. Perhaps this kind of selfish thought would occur to any man who had ever laid his eyes upon Empress Quashing. Ha 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 ha. The Eternity Sky Emperor's boisterous laugh boomed down from the sky. The radiant light dissipated, revealing his proud figure in the 9 demons' sword, which was now firmly gripped in his remaining left hand. It was evident that he had obtained the divine sword. This divine sword was passed down through bloodline inheritance, after all, and the Eternity Sky Emperor was also extremely powerful himself. After sacrificing an arm, he was finally able to become the new owner of the 9 demons' sword. Ling Han could feel the overwhelming power of the sword even from within the Black Tower. It was as if this sword could pierce through his soul and tear him to shreds. This was the 9 demons' sword, a god tool at the Eternal River tier, meaning that it was at least a level 13 god tool. Even though it was snapped and broken, it was still extremely terrifying. This was clear from the fact that the Eternity Sky Emperor had still lost an arm even though he was incredibly powerful and had cultivated a corresponding secret technique. Moreover, this was only 1/4 of the god tool. If he were to find and obtain the remaining 3 parts, and then fuse them together, how devastating would its might become? The 9 Flames Heavenly King leaped to the Eternity Sky Emperor's side, and asked, "Imperial brother, are you all right?" Since the 9 demons' sword had already been obtained, the murderous aura in this place all started to dissipate. The gigantic gathering of murderous aura naturally started to dissipate as well. "It's nothing," the Eternity Sky Emperor replied casually. "I merely lost an arm. It'll be fully healed after half a year of rest." This was no small wound, yet compared to his increase in strength, such a wound indeed paled in comparison. "I'll hand the remaining matters to you. I have to finish refining this sword, and when I'm done, obtaining the remaining 3 blade segments will become much easier," the Eternity Sky Emperor said. "Understood." The 9 Flames Heavenly King immediately accepted the command. The remaining 3 sword segments also possessed overwhelming murderous aura, so it was necessary for them to construct sacrificial altars to suppress them before they tried to obtain the sword segments. Otherwise, it would be tremendously difficult for the Eternity Sky Emperor to succeed even if he already possessed the sword hilt, and even if he was a descendant of the Chang clan. The Eternity Sky Emperor turned around and left, tearing through space as he did so. There was strong killing intent in the 9 Flames Heavenly King's eyes as he swept the surroundings with his gaze. He knew that Ling Han had been hiding in some obscure location before, though he didn't know how Ling Han had managed to hide his aura. Even though he had launched a flurry of attacks, he had still been unable to force Ling Han out of his hiding place. Right now, he was still unable to determine whether Ling Han was still in this place or not. He detested this ant that had almost ruined their sacrifices, and he dearly wished to stomp this ant to death. However, he didn't have the spare time to stand guard here. In any case, the Eternity Sky Emperor had already obtained the hilt of the Nine Demons' sword, meaning that his battle prowess had already soared to the pseudo-eternal river tier. Thus, there was nothing to worry about even if the secrets behind their actions were leaked. That being the case, he turned around and left after looking around for one last time. He still had many matters to attend to. Ling Han finally exited the Black Tower after a long time. This was to avoid being caught in a trap, although Ling Han felt that the possibility was small. Would a mighty elite at the heavenly body tier lay a trap for a small junior such as himself? Ling Han parted ways with the small dog before retrieving his cloud-piercing shuttle and hurrying toward the Eastern Rain Nation's encampment. Because there was no murderous aura to block his path anymore, his speed increased to an incredible level. It took him a mere few hours to arrive above the furious river. By the looks of it, the rumors were true, and this furious river was indeed carved out by a powerful elite. If this elite wasn't the work of the Chang clan's ancestor, then it was the extraplanetary elite he had been battling against. Ling Han landed his shuttle. Identify yourself. A group of soldiers instantly surrounded him. I'm Ling Han, a student from the Scarlet Heaven Academy. Ling Han reported his identity to the soldiers. The soldiers didn't dare believe him unreservedly, and hurriedly went to invite members of the Scarlet Heaven Academy to verify Ling Han's claim. Ling Han. Zhao Luan immediately ran over. Upon seeing Ling Han, the expression on his face became indescribably strange. Suffering a heavy defeat on his mission to launch a surprise attack on the Golden Lion Nation had dealt a heavy blow to his confidence. It had been his first time leading an army, after all, and such a result was a humiliating stain on his pride as the son of a great general. However, he still consoled himself in his mind, convincing himself that his loss had been justified. After all, the enemy had ambushed them with hundreds of elites at the Sun-Moon tier. Moreover, Ling Han had also been captured by the Golden Lion Nation, and would almost certainly be killed. Right now, however, Ling Han was standing before him unscathed, so how could his expression not be dark? How did you manage to make it back alive? He humphed, and said, you definitely betrayed us and surrendered to the enemy. That's why they released you, as a spy. Zhao Luan's words sent a wave of commotion through the encampment. There was one kind of person that soldiers hated the most: traitors. Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, Zhao, through which of your eyes do I look like a traitor? Don't spout nonsense if you don't have any evidence. Otherwise, even though you're the son of great General Zhao, I'll still have to go with you to resolve this situation before the Empress. Zhao Luan humphed coldly, and said, we were ambushed, and I was only able to break through the heavy encirclement thanks to the protection of my treasured armor. How were you able to escape? Moreover, you've returned several days after me, so is it wrong for me to assume that you surrendered after being captured? Since he hadn't been able to kill Ling Han on the battlefield, he might as well pin another crime to his name. This was a crime that concerned betrayal. If Ling Han was found guilty, there would be absolutely no need to interrogate him before the Empress. Rather, they would be able to punish him according to military regulations and kill him on the spot. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, Zhao is truly a brilliant storyteller. The situation had been so desperate, and I'm neither at the Sun-Moon tier, nor do I have any treasured armors to protect me. Thus, I could only escape without any regard for where I was heading. I only arrived back here after running around in a massive circle, so it's only natural that I arrived several days after Zhao. Zhao Luan pointed at Ling Han, and roared, enough with the excuses. Ling Han shrugged, and said, Zhao, you need evidence to back up your claims. Otherwise, I'll take you to court for defamation. Zhao Luan looked at him intently before saying, I will find the evidence. He aggressively swept his robe through the air as he left. Headstrong and narrow-minded. Ling Han critiqued Zhao Luan in his mind, and then immediately headed off to find the ninth king. The matters surrounding the 9 demons' sword were incredibly important, and had to be reported as soon as possible. Otherwise, the Eternity Sky Emperor would genuinely be able to act as he pleased if he were to obtain the complete 9 demons' swords. Ling Han. Shui Yenyu came out to meet him, and tears involuntarily flowed down her face when she saw him. The assault squad had been annihilated, and only Zhao Luan had managed to make it back alive. This caused pessimism to permeate through the camp, with everyone believing that those who had failed to return were all dead. Although Shui Yenyu was confident in Ling Han's abilities, she still couldn't help but become anxious after failing to see him return after 1, 2, and then 3 days. Now that Ling Han had finally returned, she felt as if a heavy weight had been lifted off her shoulders. At the same time, a feeling of weakness swept through her entire body. Chapter 1070, The Empress Military Expedition. Ling Han walked over and hugged her lightly before saying, "Don't worry. Have you forgotten how many trump cards I have?" Shui Yenyu remained silent and simply buried her head in his chest. Ling Han was especially touched upon sensing this beautiful woman's care for him. However, this was no time to indulge in love. "We need to visit the 9th king first. I discovered an earth-shattering secret," Ling Han said. He sought an audience with Hu Feiyun, and when she learned that he had returned, she happily invited him over, saying, "Zhao Luan actually dragged you into the assault squad and made me worry for so long. Thankfully, you're fine." Ling Han smiled, and said, "Thank you for your concern, 9th king. However, I discovered some astonishing information in the enemy camp, and I must immediately return to the imperial capital to report this to the Empress." Hu Feiyun blinked her large eyes, and asked, "Is it really that serious?" The Empress had to deal with a myriad of affairs every day, and she also had to cultivate on top of that. Ling Han was merely at the mountain river tier, so what right did he have to request an audience with the Empress? It's extremely serious," Ling Han said with a nod. Hu Feiyun pondered for a moment, and then promptly said, "Okay, we'll return right away." If she didn't go, Ling Han would have absolutely no way of meeting Empress Luan Xing. Her personality was fairly rash, and she immediately handed full control of the army to Zhao Luan. She had slacked off the entire time anyway, so this had absolutely no impact at all. Although Zhao Luan fervently opposed her decision, how could he stop the 9th king? Ling Han, Shui Yenyu, and the 9th king squeezed into the cloud-piercing shuttle and immediately set off for the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire. They had spent a full 2 months when marching there, yet they only needed a mere 3-4 days to return. It could be seen just how quick the cloud-piercing shuttle was. When they arrived at the Majestic Empire's capital, Ling Han landed the cloud-piercing shuttle before the city gates. No one dared to fly flight treasures into the imperial capital. If they did, they would be immediately shot down. Hu Feiyun led the way, so they naturally didn't come across any obstacles, and arrived before the imperial palace in no time. Hu Feiyun asked the female guards to report their arrival, and after waiting for a few hours, they were finally invited inside by the Empress. They were given an audience with Empress Luan Xing in a side palace. "Big sister." Hu Feiyun immediately sprinted over, and shouted, "I've missed you so much." Empress Luan Xing was sitting atop a throne, which was elevated 1.5 meters above the ground to begin with. She exuded a profound might as she looked down at them. Her beautiful face was still shrouded in a misty aura, making it impossible to see her face clearly. However, her slender and flawless figure still radiated an irresistible charm. Ling Han kneeled on one knee, and said, "Ling Han pays his respects, Your Imperial Majesty." Shui Yenyu hadn't come with him, as there was absolutely no need for her to be dragged into this matter. She had only returned because she was worried about what might happen if she were to remain on the front lines. Zhao Luan was still there, after all, and who knew whether he would become deranged and do something crazy. Empress Luan Xing gazed at Ling Han coldly, not calling for him to stand up either. The pressure from her gaze was like the weight of a mountain. Even Hu Feiyun didn't dare speak up for Ling Han at this moment. No one could challenge the Empress' might. You're a member of the army yourself, so why did you encourage the Ninth King to return? Empress Luanxing finally spoke, and there was a hint of displeasure in her voice. Ling Han realized that the Empress wasn't angry about them returning without regard for the battle on the front lines. Rather, she was displeased about his influence on Hu Feiyun, who had returned on his whim. He had no time to worry about this, and he said, "This subject has discovered an astonishing secret that I must immediately report to your Majesty. However, this subject's status is low, preventing me from seeking an audience with you, your Majesty. Thus, I could only seek help from the Ninth King." What secret? Empress Luanxing finally put the matter regarding Ling Han's influence on the Ninth King aside at least for the moment. Ling Han organized his thoughts before reporting to the Empress. He started from how the assault squad had been ambushed by the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire and recounted all the way until how the Eternity Sky Emperor had obtained the Nine-Demon Sword. Ah! The color immediately drained from Hu Feiyun's face. She shook Empress Luanxing's arm, and frantically said, "Big sister, what should we do?" Empress Luanxing remained calm and composed. She said, "I had heard that an imperial empire had existed on the joint peace planet countless years ago. This empire was ruled by the ancient ancestors of the Chang clan. However, a large battle erupted, resulting in the destruction of the empire that was ruled by the Chang clan. The empire that usurped their place was the Jade Drop Imperial Empire. However, the Jade Drop Imperial Empire also suffered several great calamities, which caused all of their elites to die. There was no young generation to replace them, causing their overall power to fall dramatically. In the end, the Chang clan rose again and established the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire, which remains hostile toward the Jade Drop Majestic Empire to this day." Ling Han couldn't help but feel surprised upon hearing this. So there's actually so much history and deep hatred between the two other majestic empires. If that's the case, that means the Jade Drop Majestic Empire and Eternity Sky Majestic Empire have both had supreme elites at the Eternal River tier. The Chaotic Stars Majestic Empire has the weakest origin, and has only existed for a mere 1 million years or so. This was an incredibly long time if placed in the small world, yet in the immortal realm, 1 million years was genuinely not a long time. Which of the two other majestic empires didn't have a history of over 100 million years? If one were to take their preceding empires into account, this number would increase to an even more frightening amount. Empress Luanxing ferociously stood up and said, "I'll personally lead a military expedition. Big sister, the Eternity Sky Emperor has already obtained the Nine-Demon Sword, so why don't we ask the Jade Drop Emperor to target him together with us? Otherwise, it'll be too dangerous." Hu Feiyun immediately tried to dissuade the Empress. No need. Empress Luanxing was brimming with confidence. Ling Han knew that part of her confidence stemmed from the absolute beginning Stonia stone that could absorb all attacks. Although the Nine-Demon Sword was powerful, it was only at the Eternal River tier, which was far below the upper limit of what the absolute beginning stone could absorb. With this stone in hand, Empress Luanxing naturally didn't need to worry about the Nine-Demon Sword anymore. Empress Luanxing glanced at Ling Han for a short moment. It was evident that she had guessed his thoughts. Ling Han wore a serious expression and didn't show a hint of smugness. Empress Luanxing retracted her gaze upon seeing this. Heavenly bodies undulated behind her as she took a step forward and shot into the sky. She immediately became a small dot that disappeared in the distant sky. This Empress was extremely swift in her decisions, and she immediately set off upon saying that she would lead a military expedition. "Let's head off too." Ling Han hurriedly ran out of the Imperial Palace with Hu Feiyun. However, they weren't Empress Luanxing, so they obviously didn't dare to fly in the Imperial capital. They left the Imperial capital before retrieving the cloud-piercing shuttle and flying toward the Eastern Rain Nation. The Golden Lion Nation had already retreated by the time that they arrived. No one on the front lines knew that Empress Luanxing had already fought a battle against the Eternity Sky Emperor. They were all stumped as to why the Golden Lion Nation had suddenly retreated. They could only speculate that it was because the secret of the Golden Lion Nation having the support of elites from the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire had been revealed. Perhaps they were afraid that the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire would launch an all-out war, and thus they chose to retreat to avoid this scenario. The war suddenly concluded. However, Ling Han knew that Empress Quashing had definitely won. At the very least, she had had the advantage. The Absolute Beginning Stone is so kick-ass. If it hadn't been for the Absolute Beginning Stone, it was extremely likely that Empress Quashing would have suffered a defeat. Moreover, if it weren't for the fact that the Eternity Sky Emperor only had the hilt of the Nine Demons' sword, it was possible that even the Absolute Beginning Stone wouldn't have been able to block his attacks. The Absolute Beginning Stone was only the size of a palm, after all, so how many strikes could it block? The Eternity Sky Emperor had already been severely wounded, so his strength had definitely been affected. Add to that the might of the Absolute Beginning Stone, and Empress Quashing was able to defeat him. However, no one knew what the result of their battle was. Was the Nine Demons' sword still in the Eternity Sky Emperor's possession? Or, had it been snatched by Empress Quashing and become her spoils of war? It was worth noting that the Nine Demons' sword was a god tool at the Eternal River tier, so even Empress Quashing wouldn't be able to refine it. This was because her bloodline wasn't related to that of the sword, and her cultivation level was also far from being strong enough to suppress the sword. An empire level higher than Majestic Empire. Blame the author for his naming. Chapter 1071, Crime of Treason. The war ended, and after everyone returned to the imperial capital, Zhao Luan immediately handed an indictment over to the Ministry of War, reporting Ling Han's action of defecting during the war. Zhao Luan was deputy commander of the troops, so the indictment he handed in naturally was taken seriously by the Ministry of War, what more when Zhao Luan was also the only son of the great General Zhao. His status was considerably noble, so no one would dare to treat this as a small matter. Hence, a large-scale investigation was immediately launched. The situation was indeed quite suspicious. Ling Han might be extremely genius, this was a publicly acknowledged fact. However, no matter how much of a genius you were, your actual cultivation level was there to be seen. You were only at the peak stage of the medium extreme, and even if you could exceed 5 stars in actual battle, that would only be battle prowess worth the early stage of the consummate level. There had been so many students in the middle stage, late stage, and peak stage of consummate level, and they had all been captured. How was it that only he managed to escape? Following the end of the war, the captured students were naturally released. Some of them swore that they had seen with their own eyes that Ling Han had been summoned to be interrogated by the enemy soldiers, after which he was no longer imprisoned together with them. It seemed like there were also witnesses as well. False accusations, these are all brazen false accusations. After Shui Yanyu heard it, she was naturally incredibly furious. She knew some of Ling Han's secrets. With the Black Tower, how could Ling Han have been captured? Furthermore, Ling Han had discovered the conspiracy of the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire, allowing the Empress to move personally. That showed how important the information that Ling Han had brought back was. Ling Han was a subject that had done outstanding service for the Empire, yet Zhao Luan was presently making use of his public office to avenge a private grudge. He had also collaborated with others to frame Ling Han. This was really the style of a vile character, shameless to the extreme. Ling Han chuckled, and said, "I have snatched his favorite, so he is using underhanded means to pay me back." The more shameless and contemptible his means are, the more it shows how much he is hurt. Shui Yanyu rolled her eyes at him, and asked, "You are actually not the slightest bit worried?" Zhao Luan was now boosting support for his campaign, building up the public opinion that Ling Han was a traitor to the Empire. Once everyone believed Ling Han was a traitor, then no matter what the truth was, it would no longer be important. By that time, would the Shui clan still be willing to marry their daughter off to Ling Han? Ling Han smiled, and said, "If worrying was useful, then I would worry. Who asked me to be isolated and without help? You can ask the 9th king for help." Shui Yanyu piped up immediately. Ling Han shook his head. Empress Luanxing had already expressed displeasure over the relationship between him and Hu Feiyan. If he went to ask for the Ninth King's help at this moment, he was afraid that the Empress would really do something to him. "Don't," he said. "Zhao Luan is only a clown performing his antics. As long as one person speaks up, then no matter how much these people are jumping all over the place, it would be a waste of effort." "Her Imperial Majesty, the Empress?" Shui Yenyu reacted. "My wife is truly clever." If Empress Luanxing was willing to speak up, then with her absolute authority, she was naturally capable of resolving this matter. But the problem here was that it merely implicated a minor 9th-ranked military general. How could such a trivial, small matter possibly reach the ears of her Imperial Majesty? The Empress was naturally extremely busy, and still had to concentrate fully on cultivation. She was the backbone of the Empire. Without the Empress to support the heavens, the chaotic star's Majestic Empire would have long since been annexed by the other two Majestic Empires. Thus, how could the Empress possibly bother with this kind of small matter? Ling Han smiled faintly. Shui Yenyu did not have an official rank, and had never used power of the nation. How could she possibly know that as long as Empress Luanxing wanted, she would be able to know each and every move in the whole empire? Of course, this was much too big a strain on her mentally and physically. Empress Luanxing would definitely not do that. However, the imperial capital was the most important location of all, and was naturally under the complete control of this empress. He had revealed a great conspiracy of the Eternity Sky Emperor, yet Empress Luanxing had not conferred any rewards to him. This was obviously done on purpose. She most likely wanted to make use of this opportunity to regulate the discipline in her empire and warn some people not to go too far. Empress Luanxing had never declared her position on this matter, yet Ling Han already understood it. It was because they were both smart people, and because Ling Han himself was the leader of his own empire, though his great Ling Empire was much smaller in comparison. The matter was still developing. News about Ling Han defecting and committing treason, and that he would soon be punished, spread throughout the whole imperial capital, causing quite a number of people who did not know the truth to feel great pity for him. He obviously had such great future prospects, so why had he chosen to defect? No force would accept betrayal, this was the bottom line. Under massive pressure, many people drew a clear line between themselves and Ling Han. Even Li Weiwei was no exception. She visited Ling Han's place personally, and informed him that the left minister had exerted very great pressure on her, telling her not to meet with Ling Han anymore. Although Li Weiwei might be rebellious, if it was left minister's strict command, she would not dare to go against it. Hence, she could only offer an apology to Ling Han. Ling Han was still quite touched. After all, she was the daughter of the left minister, her status noble. It was already quite remarkable that she would deliberately come and inform him of this. She was really treating him like a friend. It was impossible that the investigation would go on endlessly. After another 2 days, the Ministry of War decided to hold a public trial for Ling Han, and the time was decided to be on the noon of the next day. Those that held an official rank of the empire could not be punished by anyone after simply declaring they should be punished. Of course, the Empress was an exception. She possessed supreme authority. Thus, the Ministry of War had to first conduct a public trial to judge whether Ling Han had committed treason or otherwise. Once it was confirmed, they would be able to apply to the Empress to revoke Ling Han's official rank of a 9th-ranked military officer. After that, they would be able to punish him as they wished. From this, it could also be seen how important an official rank was. The investigation was divided into a normal investigation and a public trial. In a normal investigation, the Ministry of War would imprison Ling Han and conduct an interrogation, but the process would not be made public. Only the final result would be announced. The public trial was the exact opposite. During the investigation, outsiders were allowed to stand by and watch. Because the crime that Ling Han had possibly committed was treason, the effects were too widespread. Hence, the Ministry of War decided to conduct a public trial. Of course, it was unknown whether Zhao Luan had any part in encouraging their decision. Perhaps he wanted to see Ling Han be convicted in public. And when such an important matter had occurred, the casino would not be willing to be silent. They set out stakes on whether Ling Han would ultimately be convicted or otherwise. For example, would he be acquitted, or would his official rank be repealed? There were even stakes on whether he would be publicly executed. At this moment, the most frequently discussed topic in the entire imperial capital was the matter of Ling Han's treason. Great General Sha's residence. Sha Yuan laughed loudly, and asked, "The public trial will be tomorrow, right?" Hee, this guy is going to be out of luck. With so many witnesses' testimonies, he would definitely be nailed on the pillar of shame. This is such a good chance, and if I do not join in, that would really not be enough to vent my grudge. Yuan Long, go and make arrangements. I am sure there should not be just so few people who have witnessed Ling Han's treason, he commanded calmly. Yes, young master, a young man immediately answered from behind him. Ling Han, you are really the type that would only submit to pressure after having refused a polite offer. You must force me to make a move on you. Sha Yuan smirked coldly. Once you no longer have an official rank, added with your crime of treason, your only fate will be death. After you have been imprisoned, I will discover all the secrets you possess. Chapter 1072, Testifying. Today was the day of the public trial to decide whether Ling Han had defected and committed treason. It was exactly noon, and the Ministry of War sent out soldiers who brought Ling Han to a public court of the Ministry of War. This place was like an arena. In the center, there was a circular plain, and there were round after round of increasingly tall stairs all around. However, there were no seats. Only the three judges had seats. They occupied a high pedestal, looking down on Ling Han. Each one of them was in the sun-moon tier, and exuded an air unique to elites, forming a kind of intimidating energy by itself. Ling Han was not wearing any manacles or leg irons. Presently, he was only suspected to have defected and committed treason. However, as long as his crime was not proven, he was still innocent. He was all alone, standing in the center of the defendant's place. Meanwhile, there were people standing all around. Everyone was extremely curious. This man that had stirred countless waves and created endless ripples in the imperial capital in the last year. Would this time be his final performance before the end of the show? Shui Yanyu, Li Weiwei, and Ji Yun'er were here. Lin Yu, Ma Xing, Yi Qingyun, and other friends were here. Zhao Luan, Shui Yanyu, Jiu Wuqi, and other adversaries were also here, and added with those that were here to watch the excitement, or those that were jealous of him, they were all waiting for the show to begin on the spectators' grandstand. Ling Han, do you plead guilty? The three judges were Kong Qinghe, Gu Tianchu, and Nanmen Yang, respectively. Presently, this was a stern question from Gu Tianchu, his powerful spirit forming a terrifying spiritual intimidation, aimed directly for the heart. If it had been any other person, he would have probably lost control of his divine sense, and speak out the words at the bottom of his heart in a moment of distraction. The fact that these three could become judges naturally had its own rationale. They had amazing attainments in terms of cultivation of the spirit. In the first place, Ling Han's spirit was extremely strong and tough, and added with the fact that he still had the essence of the demon master as foundation, to intimidate him was naturally impossible. At least, it was not a feat that could be accomplished by an elite in the medium extreme of the sun-moon tier. He calmly replied, I do not know what crime I have committed. Insolence. Kong Qinghe directed a fierce glare at him. In the public court of the Ministry of War, you still dare to speak falsely? Immediately confess all the details of your collaboration with the Golden Lion Nation. Ling Han broke into a smile, and said, this is something that's never happened in the first place, so how am I supposed to confess? Humph, we knew that you were going to deny it. Come, summon the first witness. Nanmen Yang waved a hand. The first witness to appear was actually Zhao Luan. Looking at how he walked proudly down from the spectators' grandstand, Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head internally. This was really a case of villain would make a lot of mischief. You are the son of a great general, yet keep to beat down a minor character like me. Do you feel no shame? With such temperament, his achievements would be limited. Others kept saying that Zhao Luan was a genius, and the rate of his cultivation had by now exceeded that of the majority of those elites of the heavenly body tier who had been in the same age bracket, and that in the future, he was definitely going to break through to the heavenly body tier and so on. However, Ling Han hardly had any optimistic opinion of this person. Among those heavenly body tier elites he had seen, though they all had varying personalities, they all possessed supreme forcefulness without exception, and were extremely confident in themselves. But in Zhao Luan, he only saw pettiness and determination to avenge every smallest fault. This kind of character was destined to be incapable of crossing over the barrier to the heavenly body tier for eternity. Indeed, Zhao Luan was presently able to advance rapidly in his cultivation. Firstly, it was because his cultivation level was still low, after all, so he could soar. Secondly, it was because he had a good father, who was willing to snatch all kinds of natural treasures for him. Otherwise, it definitely would be impossible that he would advance into the sun-moon tier in the next millennia. Fuck, you actually dare to look down on me? Zhao Luan had been glaring at Ling Han, and when he saw the disdain in his eyes, he almost exploded in fury. You are now a prisoner, a commoner no matter what. He would not recognize Ling Han's official rank, an ant from a small world, a mere cultivator of the medium extreme of mountain river tier. What right do you have to look down on me? He was the son of the great General Zhao, and this identity was enough to dominate over 99% of all the people in the empire. Just see if I won't get you killed. Zhao Luan revealed a cold smirk and uttered, Zhao Luan pays respects to the three lords. These three judges were all officials of the Ministry of War, and had official ranks. Furthermore, they were all in a higher position than Zhao Luan. In a public setting, even Zhao Luan could not dispense with etiquette. Otherwise, it would not be an insult to the three of them, but an insult to the political system of the empire. Heir Zhao, you may dispense with the formalities. Though Kong Qinghe and the others accepted his respects calmly, they immediately greeted him cordially. How could they slight the son of the great General Zhao? Bootlickers. Li Weiwei mumbled. Her voice was not low, either. Out of those present, probably only Li Weiwei, Sha Yuan, Zhao Luan, and a few other descendants of noble clans would dare to look down on the judges like this. Kong Qinghe and the other judges looked rather awkward, but they could not afford to offend the daughter of the left minister either. Most importantly, she had not pointed right at their noses and cursed at them. Silence. Nan Menyang rebuked. The aura of the sun-moon tier rolled out, and instantly caused everyone's faces to pale. It was practically hard for them to even catch their breath. Kong Qinghe opened his mouth, and said, Heir Zhao, you were one of the commanding officers in this military expedition, and personally led the assault squad to launch a sneak attack on the Golden Lion Nation. Please describe in detail the proceedings at that time. Yes. Zhao Luan appeared very humble, giving enough face to these three people. The ninth king and I had come up with a countermeasure, and leading the troops, we set off and crossed the furious river. He began to relate the happenings of that day. He was impartial in this recounting, though, and did not deliberately frame Ling Han for anything. It was because even without him making a move here, the subsequent over dozen witnesses were the true fatal attack. Zhao Luan smirked coldly. He had mentioned the ninth king a few times, and that was to mock Ling Han. Such a huge thing had happened, yet the ninth king had not appeared at all. She had not even spoken one word on his behalf. You must be very disappointed, right? This was natural. Who did not know of the ninth king's esteemed, noble status? Furthermore, there was an unwritten rule, and that was that none of the 9 kings just like her Imperial Majesty, the Empress married. Since the 8 kings before her were thus, he was sure that the 9th king would be no exception. Her relations with Ling Han were too close, so her Imperial Majesty would definitely interfere personally. It had to be known that it was not that Zhao Luan had not had designs on the 9th king before. He was confident as he was a man of striking appearance, and one with extraordinary talent, who was furthermore the only son of the great General Zhao. Though he was inferior to the ninth king in terms of status, was there any other in the entire empire that could be matched for her? However, he had only ingratiated himself with the ninth king once, and when he returned, he was sternly warned by the great General Zhao not to have any designs on the ninth king. He was not to even think of anything of the sort, or the great General Zhao would have no choice but to personally behead him and offer his severed head to the Empress in apology. It was that serious. I, Zhao Luan, am not fit for her, so who do you, an ant from a small world, think you are? Finally, Zhao Luan added his own analysis. At the time, I was wearing the treasured armor my father had given me. After fully awakening it, I could possess defenses on the level of the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, and would be capable of flight. Even so, it was still extremely difficult for me to charge back, and bring back information about the invasion of the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire. Finally, the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire knew that their plans had been foiled, and thus chose to command the Golden Lion Nation to retreat. I would like to ask, if even I had such difficulty breaking out of such a heavy encirclement, and the subordinates that I had brought had all fallen into enemy hands, how could possibly a mere cultivator in the medium extreme of the mountain river tier manage to escape? Zhao Luan pointed at Ling Han, accusing him in a stern tone. Chapter 1073, Irrefutable Evidence. Zhao Luan was really quite thick-skinned. While beating down on Ling Han, he did not forget to blow his own trumpet, completely seizing the merit of forcing the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire to retreat. In truth, practically no one knew that Empress Luan Xing had moved personally, and thus, the fact that Golden Lion Nation, or rather the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire, had suddenly retreated their troops could only be summed up to be a result of the secret being leaked out. They apparently did not dare continue the war. Otherwise, if a full-out war broke out between the two majestic empires, it would only be advantageous to the Jade Drop Majestic Empire. Going by that account, Zhao Luan had really performed a great service because all members of the assault squad had been lost, and he had been the only one to escape. Additionally, he had also exposed the fact that the Golden Lion Nation had the support of elites from the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire. Initially, it was a grand failure, a rash act of launching an attack without even knowing the depth and ins and outs of the enemy, but in Zhao Luan's words now, it had become a great meritorious service. The level of shamelessness this man had was indeed awesome. Ling Han, what do you have to say? Nan Menyang asked Ling Han. Ling Han smiled slightly, and responded, just as Zhao Luan said, I am merely in the medium extreme, and no one would take me seriously. Then, isn't the fact I managed to escape very logical? Furthermore, I would like to ask a question of Zhao. Obviously knowing I am only in the medium extreme, why had you chosen me to be a member of the assault squad still? This, Zhao Luan paused. He had not thought that Ling Han would ask this question outright in public. Could he say that he wanted to make use of his official position to vent his personal grudge, and borrow enemy hands to erase Ling Han? If he actually said that, even he would not be let off easily. Putting aside the fact that he would be punished by the Empire, what soldier would dare follow his lead in future? Wouldn't they be worried that he would do the same to them one day? Ling Han, don't change the topic. Zhao Luan quickly exclaimed. How could he allow Ling Han to take control of the proceedings? This was a trial to judge whether the latter had defected, so why was he bringing him into the matter? Don't think of changing the topic, Gu Tianchu said with a nod of his head. He was naturally siding with Zhao Luan. Ling Han, do not try to talk your way out of this. There are many witnesses who can prove that you were indeed captured that day here. Hence, do not deny it unto death, Kong Qinghe said coldly. Oh, then I would really like to hear how I had been captured, Ling Han said, smiling. Summon the other witnesses. Kong Qinghe appeared displeased. This brat was really the type to hold out hope until faced with the grim reality. One after another, young people walked into the public court. They were precisely those students of the academy that had joined the assault squad, and were captured thereafter. Thankfully, Empress Quashing moved fast enough, or they would probably still be imprisoned in their cells at this moment. Zhao Luan's eyes swept over the company, and he couldn't help but show a hint of shock in his expression. He had only found over a dozen witnesses, yet now, the number was almost 30 in total. Why were there more of them? I am Yu Ziming. I am Ming Yuan. I am Buxing. I am. These people recited their names one after another. However, some people needed only think of their backgrounds, and would be able to discover that their elders were either the subordinates of Great General Sha or in the direct line of descent of Great General Zhao. Zhao Luan instantly understood. So it turned out that Sha Yuan was on the same side with him on this matter. He had really not expected this. However, if they still did not manage to get an outsider brat killed with the combined forces of the sons of two great generals, that would really be bizarre. I saw with my own eyes that Ling Han was captured with us. I was even jailed with him in the same prison cell. It had only been half a day, and Ling Han was summoned for interrogation. After that, he did not come back again. If he had not defected, how could he have managed to escape the enemy troops and return back to base? Thankfully, Zhao managed to bring the intel back, forcing the Golden Lion Nation and the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire to retreat. If not, with a traitor like Ling Han as their planted agent, who knows how great the damage they would be able to inflict to our empire. These people all kept repeating accusations over and over, lying through their teeth. As the saying went, public opinion was powerful enough to melt metal. With so many people accusing Ling Han at the same time, whom should the masses who were unaware of the truth believe? Naturally, they were going to believe the side that had more people. Traitor. Among the crowd, someone called out first. Traitor. Even more people began to cry out, and instantly, the situation became earth-shattering. Even if Li Weiwei, Ji Yuner, and the others believed Ling Han, their voices of objection instantly vanished among these outraged cries. Shui Yanyu clenched her fists. As long as Ling Han entered into the Black Tower, it would prove that he could not possibly be captured by the enemies, but if the secret that he possessed a spatial god tool was revealed, then who knew how many people would make a move on him. Although he was freakishly talented now, his level was still too low, after all. Elites like the Left Minister and the 7 generals could not possibly notice him, but once the secret of the spatial god tool was exposed, she was afraid that even her Imperial Majesty, the Empress, would be moved. This was a choice between a rock and a hard place. He either would be tagged with the label of a traitor, or would become the target of various elites. Whichever option it was, the consequences would be horrible. Why did the Empress still not come to resolve the situation? Could it be that in her Imperial Majesty's eyes, such a small matter was completely beneath her notice? Ling Han, what else do you have to say? Kong Qinghe asked balefully. I have nothing to say. Ling Han shook his head. Then you plead guilty? Gu Tianshu continued. Ling Han shook his head as he said, I really have nothing to say to this bunch of stupid birds. They are all lying through their teeth, so there's absolutely no space for communication. You, traitor, you still dare deny it. After committing such a disgraceful deed, you still dare to act arrogant. These witnesses were all filled with righteous indignation. They were actually called stupid birds in public. Ling Han said calmly, what we do the heavens see. Ask the heart of your cultivation, if you do so, would you be able to go on with a light heart? He used the 7-kill subduing soul technique to speak out these words. They merely reached the depths of their souls, and did not possess any destructive ability. Suddenly, these witnesses all paled. Their hearts all endured a questioning, and even their souls were trembling. Ling Han, you actually dare threaten the witnesses? Zhao Luan exclaimed sinisterly. Boom, as a red sun rose up behind him, the aura of the sun-moon tear spread out without any reservations, and constricted Ling Han. Ling Han couldn't help but become sluggish. He could even be unafraid of the air of eternal river tear, but air and aura were two different things. Now, this aura was real and solid pressure pressing down on him. It was suppression of a whole major tier. This was a gap that no genius could possibly compensate for. Ling Han immediately broke out in a sweat. Ka, ka, ka. His godly bones were cracking, and his face flushed red instantly. He did not bend in the slightest, and merely asked coldly, Zhao, are you trying to obtain a confession under duress? In front of so many witnesses, you still deny it flatly. So what if I force a confession out of someone like you? Zhao Luan smirked icily. Zhao Luan, you have gone too far. Li Weiwei couldn't stop herself from standing up. Fourth young miss, excuse me. Xiang Qingyun immediately moved. His palm swept over, and Li Weiwei was instantly rendered mute. This was a complete suppression from one at consummate level towards another in the low extreme. The Lord Left Minister had commanded for Li Weiwei to maintain a distance from Ling Han as much as possible. For Xiang Qingyun, this was really a piece of good news. Thus, he was very happy to become a villain like that. In any case, he knew that it was definitely impossible for Li Weiwei to favor him, so what if he garnered her hatred? He only had to hold on tight to the Lord Left Minister. Ling Han, things have already come to this point. If you are still unwilling to confess, we can only hand you over to the torture devices. Nan Men Yang declared sinisterly. Chapter 1074, Will of the Empress. Ha ha ha. Ling Han laughed loudly. All right then. I would really like to see how are you all going to obtain a confession from me under torture. Ling Han, even if you are a glib speaker, do not think you will be able to escape today. Facts speak louder than words. Now that you have done this shameful deed, you should pay the price for it. The Empire will not accept traitors. Those witnesses had already recovered from the Ling Han's attack to their spirit. Naturally, they were all very energetic again, wanting nothing more than to rush up personally and force Ling Han's head to the ground, compelling him to kneel down and confess his guilt. Traitor, die. On the spectators' grandstand, someone tossed out an egg. It was naturally impossible that it would hit Ling Han, and was blocked by the shield of origin power that he had put up. Ling Han's eyes swept over, and he saw that it was a sneaky-looking young man. When the latter realized his eyes were focused on him, he immediately shrank back, and did not dare meet his gaze. One of either Zhao Luan's or Sha Yuan's underlings, Ling Han immediately thought. They were trying to trigger a public outrage. True enough, with this toss from him, a great many became stirred up. Some people had come prepared, and were throwing eggs. Some had not been prepared, and so they spat down at him. Though Ling Han had put up a shield, and would not be hit by anything, nor be spat on, there was over 1,000 people here, and at least one half of them was doing something insulting to him. What kind of humiliation was that? If this spread out, how would Ling Han be able to face the public any longer? Zhao Luan smirked coldly. He did not care what the truth was. If he could use the crime of treason to kill Ling Han, that would naturally be the best-case scenario. But even if he couldn't, merely this scene alone was enough for Ling Han to suffer. How would he be able to hold his head up high in future? In this battle, he had won, and it was a complete victory. He was a minor character without any background nor foundation to speak of, so what qualified him to be an apt match for him? Zhao Luan looked towards Zhihui Yanyu, and saw that this seductive beauty was clenching her fists, her beautiful face pale. Involuntarily, a maniacal pleasure rose up in him. He had already gotten bored of Yang Luodan. Looking at her on her own, she was quite beautiful, but if she was standing next to Zhihui Yanyu, she was completely out of her league. You will not be able to escape the palm of my hand. Come, bring the torture devices. Gu Tianshu called out. With so many witnesses here, it was not too much for him to suggest the use of torture, and complied with the rules. Very soon, 2 men carried in a massive grindstone. This was a cruel torture. It was to crush one underneath the grindstone, and every bit of blood, flesh, and bone would be crushed into mush. However, immortals were hard to kill, so they could endure it for a very long period of time. Thus, the pain they had to endure was naturally even more extreme. Anyone would pale when speaking of this torture device. Zhao Luan and Sha Yuan both smirked coldly. Finally, they could make this commoner endure some real and genuine suffering. Those witnesses, meanwhile, smirked coldly. Some of them had no choice but to provide false testimony due to their orders, while others wanted nothing more than for Ling Han to vanish from this moment on due to their jealousy of him. Now that their plans were finally going to succeed, they were naturally pleased. Begin the torture. Gu Tianshu commanded, clapping down the judge's gavel. Wait. Just at this moment, a woman strode over. She was wearing a brilliant gold armor, just like a female goddess of war, exuding a supreme aura. We pay respects to the chief commander. The three judges quickly stood, circled around from behind their desks, and knelt down to pay respects to this female guard. Respects to the chief commander. Even Zhao Luan and Sha Yuan knelt, and everyone on the spectators' grandstand knelt. No one dared to refuse to pay their respects. Chu Chioshua, the chief commander of the Imperial Guard, an elite of the heavenly body tier. Whichever identity she was using, it was enough to intimidate the whole world. In the whole chaotic star's majestic empire, only 9 kings, the left and right ministers, and 7 generals could stand with her on equal level. However, Chu Chioshua was always by the side of her Imperial Majesty, the Empress, and could be considered her trusted aide. In a sense, she could be considered the latter's representative, so her status was naturally even higher than the others. Such a powerful figure had personally arrived, who wouldn't be very scared and on edge at her presence. Rise. Chu Chioshua said calmly. She was incredibly beautiful, but at this moment, who would dare to take a second look at her? Such a powerful figure, such an elite. If anyone actually dared to stare at her, wasn't it courting death? Only now did everyone dare to rise to their feet. They were all confused and filled with incomprehension. This was only a trial for a mere 9th-ranked military officer, so how had it attracted the favorite of her Imperial Majesty? I came here today to read out a commendation from her Imperial Majesty. Chu Chioshua said, her eyes sweeping over Ling Han and Zhao Luan. Her Imperial Majesty wanted to present a reward? Then it had to be for Zhao Luan. Everyone was sure of this. Zhao Luan had discovered the huge conspiracy of the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire, finally culminating in the latter willingly retreating. This was a huge service, so it was logical that her Imperial Majesty, the Empress, would reward him for this outstanding service. Still, she chose to do so at this moment. Wasn't that completely announcing Ling Han's death sentence in a roundabout way? It looked like they didn't even need to use torture, and the Empress was already declaring her position in this matter. Later, they would simply have Ling Han dragged out and beheaded. Even Zhao Luan thought that way, and involuntarily put on a proud look. He had just been rewarded by the Empress not too long ago, and granted the title of a 7th-rank military officer. Now that he was again rewarded for his service, no matter what, his official rank could be boosted to another rank. TSK, TSK, TSK. A 6th-rank military officer that had not even reached the age of 1,000. Even in the Empire, this was rarely seen. Who knew how many people would die of envy? Chu Chioshua drew out an imperial decree. Instantly, golden light shot out in all directions, exuding a frightening pressure. Her Imperial Majesty flourishes. Everyone once again knelt to receive the decree from the Empress. Imperial appointment for Chu Chioshua read out loud. She was an elite of the heavenly body tier, so there was no need for her to read too loudly. As her divine sense spread out, her words could clearly spread to each and every corner. Ling Han as a 7th-rank military officer. Pooh. When they heard Chu Chioshua read out the last words, everyone choked. They stared with eyes wide open, their mouths so wide agape that a fist could fit inside. The imperial appointment from the Empress was actually not for Zhao Luan, but rather Ling Han. This. What was going on here? Wasn't this guy a traitor? Hadn't Zhao Luan exposed the conspiracy of the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire, and thus performed a great service? How come it was now the opposite? Everyone was stupefied, but would the Chief Commander Chu joke around regarding the will of the Empress? You had to be joking. She was Chief Commander Chu, the Empress's trusted aide. The Empress did not ask whether Ling Han was a traitor, but chose to announce her imperial appointment for Ling Han at this moment in time. Was her meaning not clear enough? The Empress was pleased with Ling Han here. Who else would dare proclaim that Ling Han was a traitor? If anyone dared to call Ling Han a traitor, wasn't that a direct slap to the Empress's face? Just ask the world, who would dare slap the face of the Empress? And, was there anyone that bold? Zhao Luan's initially proudly upheld expression instantly crumbled. His body had even begun to tremble. As the son of great General Zhao, he was very awesome. But in front of Empress Luan Xing, he was considered nothing. Putting him aside, so what if it was his father instead? If the Empress wanted to kill him, she would similarly not be merciful at all. Otherwise, the 8 generals wouldn't have become the 7 generals in the first place. The Empress herself favored Ling Han, and yet you wanted to set him up. Wasn't that outright going against the Empress? To dare go against the Empress in the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire. You had to be an idiot. The kind with no fear of death. Zhao Luan felt that he was presently an idiot, but he had a very healthy fear of death. Chapter 1075, One who rendered meritorious service should not be treated unfairly. Things had taken a new turn. Who would have imagined that the Empress would suddenly intervene? Such a trivial matter that merely involved a minor 9th-rank military officer actually caused the Empress to personally issue an imperial decree to be read at this point in time. Furthermore, a super elite the likes of Chu Qiushue was dispatched. A great many sensed even more than that. The Empress was definitely not just rewarding Ling Han. Ling Han received the decree. Chu Qiushue handed the decree over to Ling Han. Yes. Ling Han respectfully accepted the decree, yet was mocking her internally. Couldn't you have come earlier? You had to wait until such a crucial point, and almost caused him to be tortured. Chu Qiushue turned around, and declared, Her Imperial Majesty has said that those who rendered meritorious service should not be treated unfairly, and we should not allow our loyal subjects to be bitterly disappointed. Those who rendered meritorious service. Ling Han had rendered a meritorious service? What outstanding merit had he actually rendered? Zhao Luan was suddenly shocked. When Ling Han had returned to the base camp, he immediately persuaded the 9th king to go back to the imperial capital. At the time, he only thought Ling Han was a coward after all. There were several hundred Sun-Moon tier elites on the opposite bank. Without an elite of the heavenly body tier standing guard, who would be unafraid? But now that he thought of it, Ling Han had to have found out some incredible secret. Could it be that the fact the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire retreated was also linked to Ling Han? Involuntarily, his face turned livid. At first, he had thought he had made a great achievement. Who would have thought that he had completely misunderstood it and made a mistake? Why? Why was it that whenever he tangled with Ling Han, it was always the latter who had the upper hand? Zhao Luan was so confused he wanted to pull out his own hair. Whichever aspect it was, wasn't he superior to Ling Han a few hundredfold? So why was it that he was always losing to Ling Han? Chu Qiushue's killing intent soared, her eyes sweeping over the 30 witnesses, causing these people to shudder in fear. Loyal subjects should not be bitterly disappointed. What did that mean? Pa! Chu Qiushue moved, her palm pressing down on empty air. Immediately, one man's head was crushed, and blood spurted out in all directions. This was the Ministry of War. To publicly commit murder in the Ministry of War, how overbearing was that? Of course, only Chu Qiushue would dare do something like that. She represented the imperial decree of the Empress. Putting aside the fact that she had only killed these people without any official rank to speak of, so what if they did have official rank? No, don't kill me. It's Zhao. It's Sha. These people were just about to confess that it was Zhao Luan and Sha Yuan behind them, but Chu Qiushue did not give them this chance. Her palm struck out once more, and the heads of these 20-odd people were instantly crushed. Bright crimson blood and white brain matter splattered all over the ground. It was bloody, cruel, and forceful. This was a suppression. Everyone else was shaking in fear. This was the Empress expressing her stand on this matter. Don't think that just because the Empress resided deep in the palace, she knew nothing, and could easily be fooled by her subjects. On the contrary, the Empress perceived even the finest details, and there was nothing that could be hidden from her. Obviously, Her Imperial Majesty was unimpressed by the web of relations that the great generals had interwoven among themselves. This was the Empress's majestic empire, and not the backyard of any great generals. However, the Empress had obviously left some face for Great General Zhao and Great General Sha. Though these witnesses had been executed, she did not let Zhao Luan or Sha Yuan be implicated in the matter. Otherwise, if she really wanted to pursue this matter, these two people would really be in for some serious punishment. Moreover, it was also very interesting that the Empress had appointed Ling Han as a 7th-rank military officer, because Zhao Luan was also a 7th-rank military officer. In the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, the two of them were completely equal in rank now. Chu Qiushue withdrew her hand, and calmly said, "I have to return now. I shall not further disturb your public trial, you may continue with it." As she said so, she walked off. We see the chief commander off. The masses once again knelt. Chu Qiushue had left for quite a while, and the air unique to an elite of the heavenly body tier finally disappeared. Everyone seemed to have gone through a major illness, their expressions extremely unsightly. Just now, Chu Qiushue had deliberately released the air of the heavenly body tier. The intimidation from that was naturally frightening. If she had intended to kill them, everyone here would be killed in an instant, their spirits directly crushed under her pressure. "Are we continuing the trial?" Gu Tianchu asked, his voice trembling. What else was there to investigate? Her Imperial Majesty had already issued an imperial decree to promote Ling Han, and they were to still continue the trial? Fuck, wasn't that putting their own heads on a tray? Were they tired of living to actually choose to go against the Empress's will? After strict investigation, we have confirmed that the previous witnesses were all framing Ling Han. The matter of defection and treason is completely false. Kong Qinghe felt like he had swallowed a few hundred flies, but had no choice but to announce the verdict. Ling Han is acquitted and released, this matter is never to be mentioned again in future. Whoever dares to discuss the matter of Ling Han's defection will be dealt with under the crime of having slandered a meritorious official of the empire. After saying so, the three men left as if they were fleeing from something. They really could not bear to stay any longer. They felt as if their faces would twitch every single time Ling Han's eyes swept over them. It was incredibly uncomfortable. Everyone left bit by bit. Very quickly, every detail of this public trial spread throughout the whole imperial capital. Naturally, no one dared to once again mention the matter of Ling Han's defection. Even the Empress had declared her position in this matter, and who would dare go against her judgment? In the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, the Empress was a true god. She was the heaven and earth. Her every word and her every opinion were worth more than anything. Meanwhile, Ling Han was finally able to return to the great Ling Empire. Previously, he had already planned to do so. However, the sudden invasion of the Golden Lion Nation had interrupted his plans, and with such a delay, more than 2 months had passed. The things that should be prepared he had long prepared. He had also refined more alchemical pills which he left in the pharmacy. Money should still be earned. "I will go with you." Shui Yanyu knew that he had long since planned to return. Ling Han smiled slightly, and said, "You are my wife, and indeed, you should meet those brothers of mine. Furthermore, after we return to the great Ling Empire, it should be time for us to have our wedding night so you can bear me a few children. Go to hell. Shui Yanyu feigned anger, rolling her eyes at him. Ling Han laughed loudly. On the second day, he left the imperial capital with Shui Yanyu, and set out towards the great Ling Empire. They had the cloud-piercing shuttle with them. Unless an elite of the heavenly body tier made a move to snipe them out of the skies, it would definitely be impossible to catch them. Of course, when they returned to the great Ling Empire, it would also be considerably dangerous. There were no elites standing guard, so even if Ling Han was a 7th-ranked military officer of the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire, it was useless. Who would care? However, after being away for so long, Ling Han was definitely going to return at least once. Previously, he had been unable to leave because of his status as a hostage. Now that he had the chance, he definitely had to return to the Great Ling Empire. Only if the Great Ling Empire really prospered and flourished would he be able to leave with a light heart, and find his parents, son, and female friends. The cloud-piercing shuttle streaked through the air like it was a bolt of lightning. Very soon, even the eyes of the Mountain River tier could no longer see it. Even if elites of the Sun Moon tier pursued it with full effort, they could only feel powerless and too lacking to catch up. Half a month later, the cloud-piercing shuttle brought the couple to the Great Ling Empire. Finally, he had returned. Ling Han let out a deeply moved sigh. Although he was now already an immortal, he was still more accustomed to his original world. Wang. The great formation of the imperial capital activated, and targeted the cloud-piercing shuttle. However, it was only a formation technique of shattering void tier level, so even with a boost from power of the nation, it could not possibly become any sort of obstruction to the cloud-piercing shuttle. It only trembled slightly, and the cloud-piercing shuttle had burst through the obstruction of the formation technique, descending down on the imperial palace. Who goes there? Abruptly, everyone in the imperial palace was stirred up. Chapter 1076, Return to the Great Ling Empire. The moment the defensive formation technique broke, the totem naturally sent out a warning to those in the imperial palace at the first opportunity. Hence, Feng Peiyun, the Rain Emperor, Murong Qing, Helian Tianyun, and the others all rushed out, and added with a large number of soldiers, they surrounded the cloud-piercing shuttle. Was this bullying them just because they were a nation without a monarch? They actually dared mock them like this. Humph, allow me to crush this wretched vessel. Helian Tianyun had a fiery temper. Though he looked to be less than 10 years old, the air he exuded was shockingly at the immortal level. He punched out, and it transformed into a roaring black dragon that shot out towards the cloud-piercing shuttle. A gigantic demonic beast appeared, and with a claw of its paw, the black dragon was shattered. It went incredibly easy. Ha ha ha, I, the Azura Demon Emperor, have once again returned. What? Helian Tianyun and the others were all astonished. They naturally knew who the Azura Demon Emperor was. Not long before Ma Duobao had opened the sky, he had even come here with the people of the 5 sects to attempt to kill Ling Han so he could snatch away the latter's fated opportunity. Hadn't this guy been subdued by Ling Han? Why had he now appeared here again? Furthermore, he had become so powerful that he could easily disperse even an attack from Helian Tianyun. It had to be known that though Helian Tianyun had just broken through to the immortal level, he had cultivated up to the shattering void tier in 2 lifetimes. When Ling Han opened the skies, his power had reached 14 stars, and after opening the sky, as a subject of the Great Ling Empire, he had also been rewarded by the heaven and earth. Though his good fortune was not as much as Ling Han's, he had still been given a boost of an additional 2 stars. In strength alone, he had already reached 16 stars. That kind of foundation was too deep and resounding, so the moment he advanced into the Mountain River tier, his battle prowess would be able to exceed 4 stars, which was incredibly frightening. Yet the Azura Demon Emperor managed to easily disperse a full power attack from him. Then, how powerful had this demon become? More importantly, since he appeared, then what about Ling Han? Could it be that he had been murdered? Pa! Just at this moment, a tall, slender figure appeared. He raised a hand and gave a sharp knock on the head of the demon wolf. What are you strutting around for? Hee, this little Azura has returned to our homeland, and so had gotten a bit carried away. Please forgive me, master. The demon wolf that had been so majestic moments ago abruptly became an obedient puppy, waving that huge tail of his madly, pander, written all over his face. Fuck, he had really changed faces too fast, hadn't he? Fourth brother. Your Majesty. Master. Young Master Ling. Ling Han. Feng Peiyun, Ding Ping, Ken Yi, and the 7 kings as well as the various guardians all exclaimed in surprise. As it turned out, Ling Han had returned. Big brother. Second brother. Third brother. Ling Han quickly ran over, and embraced Feng Peiyun and the others. Even though this group of men would not shed tears easily, they could not help but break out in tears now. Yet, at the same time, they were laughing loudly, which caused Shui Yenyu, who had followed outside, to look out curiously because she had never seen this face of Ling Han. This was the real Ling Han, wasn't he? In the imperial capital, where he was unfamiliar and all alone, he had been wearing a mask, and closed off his heart. He had only let go of his facade at this moment, and showed his truest face here. She looked on gladly. The more pleased this man was, the happier she was as well. Everyone had spotted Shui Yenyu, and had also sensed the powerful air she was exuding. That was a suppression from a superior level, a limitation that no genius could possibly step over. She was just like Hellion Tianyun, at the immortal level. Oh, she is my wife, Shui Yenyu, Ling Han introduced, smiling. Shui Yenyu was both embarrassed and pleased. However, there were too many people here, so she was too embarrassed to pinch Ling Han. She merely gave a slight bow, and said, Yenyu meets big brother, second brother, third brother. Just now, she had watched Ling Han call out to Feng Peiyun and the others, so she was naturally aware that these 3 men were Ling Han's sworn brothers. Then what about me? Hellion Tianyun was displeased now. I am fuck in the ancestors' rank, so why has she not greeted me? Don't mind him, he's just a shameless old man pretending to be young. Ling Han shoved Hellion Tianyun aside, causing the latter to yell out in anger. Ordinarily speaking, Ling Han should also call him an ancestor. Damn it. Madam. Ding Ping called out loudly, slightly hesitant to look upon such a beautiful madam. Ling Han swept an eye over him, and said, not bad. I have just left for over a year, and you have already cultivated until the spiritual infant tier. This time, I will give you private lessons again, allowing you to advance into the immortal level before I leave. Fourth brother, are you leaving again? Feng Peiyun muttered. Ling Han broke into a smile, and said, this time, not only I will leave. You all leave with me, brothers. I have already established some foundation in the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire, and I presently need you all to lend me a helping hand, brothers. Feng Peiyun and the others were greatly pleased. They were all proud and powerful figures in their own right, each one of them an incredible genius. How rare was it for someone to be able to cultivate all the way up to the Shattering Void tier in a small world. They, too, longed to make their way in the immortal realm. It was only because Ling Han had been taken away as a hostage that they had to protect the great Ling Empire on his behalf. Now that Ling Han had established some foundation, they were naturally pleasantly surprised. Fourth brother, you are really incredible. I thought that I would have to stay here for more than a century to be able to see you again. The Rain Emperor laughed. This was not an overboard compliment. It had to be known that appearing in the kind of place that the immortal realm was, it was a given that Ling Han would have to start over from zero. Only Shui Yenyu was the clearest about the amazing accomplishments that Ling Han had made in this last year or so. The fact caused her heart to ripple and her eyes to become tender. Come. Fourth brother, tell us what you have gone through in the last year. Murong Qing pulled on Ling Han. Oh, right. What cultivation level are you in now? This attracted everyone's curiosity. After all, the most crucial thing for cultivators was still cultivation level. Everyone here was his trusted comrade, so there was nothing that Ling Han felt the need to hide. Hence, he replied, the peak stage of the medium extreme. Pooh! Helian Tianyun abruptly choked. Only he had advanced into a mortal level in this place, so he was naturally aware how difficult it was to advance in the mountain river tier. Putting aside the peak stage of medium extreme, even if Ling Han was only in the peak stage of the low extreme, it would have been inconceivable. It should be known that even he was only in the early stage of low extreme, and there was practically not even a sliver of improvement since he broke through. There was nothing that could be done. His cultivation resources could not catch up. In this place, how would he have been able to obtain true origin stones or various immortal level divine pills? You brat are a freak, you have always been, he exclaimed. Just imagine, the fact he had lived 2 lives was already awesome enough, yet he was still no match for Ling Han. Shui Yenyu, though, was surprised. She naturally knew that Ling Han had come by opening the sky, and she had also heard Ling Han speak of the origins of those close to him, so she knew that these people did not have a mortal level background. But even with that, Helian Tianyun still managed to advance into the mountain river tier. This was too inconceivable. If she told this to others, probably no one would believe her. For them to be able to come by opening the sky in a small world, there were truly a number of super geniuses gathered here. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Come, let's speak as we walk." The 4 brothers, along with Helian Tianyun and Ding Ping, were those closest to Ling Han. As they drank wine, they heard Ling Han talk about his experiences in the last year and so. They all felt overwhelmed by emotions, wanting nothing more than to immediately charge out into this boundless immortal realm themselves to make their way in this world and have their own adventures. When Ling Han had finished his account, Feng Peyun and the others also talked about the recent situation in the Great Ling Empire. Restlessness was secretly brewing. Chapter 1077, Everyone Cultivating. 4th brother, you have not returned for a long time, causing some people to have inappropriate ideas. Murong Qing was the first to speak. Recently, when government decrees are relayed, they encountered obvious obstruction. Some of the people underneath are no longer willing to know their own place. The Rain Emperor humphed, killing intent burning in his eyes. When speaking of the management and government of a country, he was the most experienced. He was also the one among the 4 brothers whose killing intent flourished the most and was the most domineering. Ling Han smiled slightly. As long as one had enough ability, they would be able to easily suppress everything else. Attaching oneself to a majestic empire had at least one advantage, and that was that the safety of your nation would be guaranteed, and other nations would not easily launch an invasion into your territory, and even if there was an invasion, you would still be able to ask for help from your suzerain empire, just like the Eastern Rain nation previously. Thus, the possibility that the Great Ling Empire was facing an external threat was not high, but if there was internal strife among them, the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire would not be so free as to interfere in their internal matters. In any case, they only had to guarantee that this territory was still attached to the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire, and that was sufficient. This was an internal matter, so outsiders were naturally not going to interfere so easily. Ling Han said, "My 3 brothers, these are all just trivial matters. Today, we are pleased, so let's not speak of this sort of thing. We will drink and only stop when we are all drunk. We will get thoroughly drunk." Feng Peyun and the others were all open-minded people, and immediately raised their cups and drank heartily. It was rare that Ling Han would get himself drunk. When he awoke on the morning of the 2nd day, he realized he was lying on the bed, and there was a ravishingly beautiful, seductive beauty in his arms. Who else could it be but Shui Yenyu? He turned pale with fright and asked, "Did we do that yesterday?" Shui Yenyu was both embarrassed and irritated. She rolled her eyes at him and said, "You got drunk yesterday, and I helped you into the room." However, you kept holding on to me and wouldn't let go no matter what, so I could only stay by your side. In other words, he had been so drunk that he couldn't even do anything. Ling Han let out a sigh in relief, and said, "Good, good. If the first time happened in such a muddle-headed manner, that would be too much of a loss." Pa. Shui Yenyu immediately threw a pillow over, which pounded into his face. I say, wife, was it because that I did not do you yesterday that you are currently dissatisfied and resentful? Ling Han asked, smiling. Shui Yenyu was about to explode in anger. This lecher, this damn pervert. He actually had the face to say that. Schwa, schwa, schwa. Whatever she could grab, she threw over. At first, it was the other pillow, followed by the blanket. Then, she even tossed the cup and the saucer at Ling Han. Meanwhile, Ling Han quickly caught the projectiles, and threw them onto the bed. When Shui Yenyu realized that there was nothing else she could throw, he chuckled and pounced on her, pushing Shui Yenyu down, and imprisoning this seductive beauty beneath his own body. Tisk, tsk, tsk. I am really too amazed with myself, he said in self-satisfaction. Amazed with what? Shui Yenyu was uncomfortable underneath his weight, her eyes soft. Even her delicate body had turned to water, soft and weak. Due to my earnest, hard work, this place of yours seems to have gotten slightly bigger. Ling Han laughed naughtily. With a gentle squeeze, Shui Yenyu released a captivating moan. Damn pervert. Shui Yenyu felt like she was going to die from blushing. Why did this villain always like to grab her breasts? Weren't they just a couple lumps of flesh? Were the other parts of her body not considered flesh, then? Woo! Her mutterings were lost underneath Ling Han's burning kiss. Very quickly, Ling Han ignited her passion, and she entwined her jade-like arms around Ling Han's neck, passionately kissing back. Bang, bang, bang. It was just at this crucial moment that a knock sounded at the door. Ling Han was greatly irritated. Who was it? He had just been planning to devour this bewitching vixen. Little Han, wake up and go to the toilet. Helian Tianyun's snicker rang out from behind the door. Fuck, he knew that it had to be this old pervert. Ling Han sighed. Looking at Shui Yenyu, who was rapidly entering into a daze, he knew that he would not be able to devour this bewitching vixen today. Furthermore, this woman was extremely shy, so she would probably be avoiding him as much as possible in the next several days. If he wanted to devour her, he would have to wait a few more days. Forget it, he should deal with serious matters first. Ling Han went out, and called over his 3 brothers, Ding Ping, and Helian Tianyun. Then, he began to teach them the cultivation techniques of the immortal realm. It would not be proper for Ling Han to teach them the Universal 8 Desolation technique privately before he had gotten permission from Old Man Su, as the latter had been the one who had taught him. Thus, the cultivation technique he taught Helian Tianyun was what he had managed to obtain at the auction. Though it was not the highest level cultivation technique, it was definitely better than what he had obtained at the Scarlet Heaven Academy. Additionally, he could not privately teach them the cultivation technique of the Scarlet Heaven Academy either. There was a ban on such actions. Aside from that, Ling Han had not been able to afford redeeming higher-level cultivation techniques. My 3 brothers, you were not the main lead in opening the sky, so your strength could not possibly reach 20 stars, but you will still be able to reach 18 to 19 stars. I hope that you all can cultivate until you feel like you can advance no further before attempting to break through to the immortal level, Ling Han said. N. Feng Piyun and the others nodded. All of them were men of ambition, and were thus naturally unwilling to be ordinary immortals. If they were going to cultivate, they would become invincible among others of the same cultivation level. This time, it was not like when Ling Han had first entered into Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire, when he did not have any cultivation resources on hand at all. On the contrary, this time, the things Ling Han produced were not the slightest bit inferior to what an elite of the heavenly body tier could take out. After all, they were just ultimate treasures for the mortal realm, so no matter how expensive they were, there was a limit to their price. Moreover, the Jade Heaven pills that Ling Han concocted were a very profitable business. The rate at which he earned money from it was shocking. Meanwhile, Helian Tianyun sighed. He was a descendant of the dragon race, and had an advantage in terms of bloodline. He had not been in the immortal realm for many days before he had broken through to the immortal level with the aid of his bloodline. Thus, he had not cultivated his strength to the maximum, and this made him feel slight regret. Unfortunately, he could not possibly abandon this life for this reason and resurrect himself for a third time, could he? Where would there be so many ultimate treasures for him to squander? Treasures that could allow the soul to reincarnate were pitifully limited even in the immortal realm. Thankfully, strength of 16 stars could not be considered weak either. After all, the shattering void tier was only one stage on the path of cultivation, and it alone could not possibly decide the future of a cultivator. Ling Han handed out the resources generously. He wanted to help his three brothers break through to the immortal level in the shortest amount of time, and that was with the prerequisite that they had to temper their foundations to an incredibly stable, solid extent. After that, he turned his attention to Ding Ping. He had indeed recognized this disciple, but he had not taught him for long. He was really too irresponsible as a master. Thus, after deep self-reflection, he began to drill Ding Ping. Ding Ping was having a miserable time. In the Black Tower, he screamed endlessly. His yell sounded so extremely tragic that anyone who heard him would shiver. That was how terrifying he sounded. In a few more days, the reincarnation tree would have completely matured. Ling Han broke out in a grin. This was his greatest rare treasure. To comprehend Tao underneath the reincarnation tree, every instant was an entire lifetime. This was practically cheating. The cultivation of origin power and stamina could all be boosted with the help of alchemical pills and various natural treasures. In comprehension, though, one could only depend on oneself. The reincarnation tree, meanwhile, would endlessly shrink down the time that one would need to comprehend Tao, or rather, extend it. Master, can I rest for a while? Ding Ping asked, grimacing. He was carrying a huge boulder on which Ling Han was seated. It was incomparably heavy, causing his arms to keep shaking. That was because Ling Han was using the divine patterns of gravity. Of course, he was only using a little of their effect. Ding Ping, who was merely in the spiritual infant tier, could not possibly bear the weight otherwise. No, run another 3 rounds. Chapter 1078, Advancing Through the Levels Rapidly. Ling Han would drill Ding Ping every day until the latter cried out in pain, but his improvement was also obvious. He did not know that possessing a certain kind of bloodline or rather being born fortunate, and thus possessing some kind of powerful power would allow his strength to burst 100-fold over. This was extremely terrifying. Merely this ability alone would allow him to possess battle prowess to surpass 2 stars in the immortal level. And that was an eternal boost. The gap in strength between each sub-minor level and the next should be about 10 times. Thus, a burst of 100-fold could compensate for the gap of 2 sub-minor levels. From this, it could also be clearly seen how massive the gap between each cultivation level in the immortal level was. That was why there were so few geniuses that could surpass 4 stars, while 5-star geniuses only existed in legends. Ling Han wanted to squeeze out all of Ding Ping's potential and train an awesome, brilliant disciple. 4 days later, the reincarnation tree finally matured completely. The treetop stretched out as wide as 300 meters, and there was the air of the great Tao wandering about the leaves. It was mysterious, powerful, and ancient. Ling Han had obviously watched it grow, yet he felt an ancient, aged feeling from this great tree as if it had gone through millions and millions of years. A reincarnation tree that required 12 trillion years to mature grew up just like that. The Black Tower is even more awesome, Ling Han mused. His abrupt rise could not be separated from the help of the Black Tower. Otherwise, even if he had not died in his last life, he would now only be an alchemy emperor by now. In martial arts, however, his achievements would definitely be limited because the foundations he'd laid down in his early stages were really too terrible. This reincarnation tree had not grown naturally, but rather its growth had been expedited through my use of the mystical power of source power. Thus, the effects are slightly weaker. Small Tower appeared, and explained to Ling Han, comprehending Tao underneath the tree is far from reaching the extent that one instant would be equivalent to a lifetime, but rather one day would equal a single year. That was already awesome enough. After another 10 years, the leaves can be plucked to be processed into tea leaves. The effects would be also better. You probably would be able to obtain the spiritual comprehension worth 10 years with a single cup. Unfortunately, my source power has been fully expended once more, and I can no longer expedite it further. Ling Han was already so nicely surprised there was no room for further happiness. He said, "Enough, enough. This is already awesome enough. That is because you are a frog at the bottom of a well, so you do not know that there aren't few treasures that can speed up the passage of time." Small Tower probably had let its tongue slip once more, for it quickly fell silent. "I have to mend the Black Tower. If there's nothing important, don't come and bother me." As it said so, it disappeared in a flash, and no matter how much Ling Han summoned it, it was not willing to reappear. Fuck, I am the master, in any case. This is really too disrespectful. Ling Han gritted his teeth. This Small Tower was really too much of a tsundere. Never mind, he'd first improve the abilities of those around him. Ling Han drew Shui Yenyu, Feng Peiyun, and the others into the Black Tower, and had them comprehend Tao under the reincarnation tree. It was madness. When one had reached the heights they had, what they lacked was the time to comprehend Tao, but underneath the reincarnation tree, one day would be equivalent to a year. What kind of concept was that? Really, even a dumb pig would be able to become a true god with that. At first, it was their comprehension of the profound secrets of heaven and earth that could not catch up with their advancement in origin power and stamina. Now, it was the exact opposite. Their spiritual cultivation had surpassed their physical cultivation, and it was their physical cultivation that was now holding them back. Thankfully, Ling Han was the Alchemy Emperor. If his ordinary cultivation could not catch up, he only needed to take alchemical pills to speed it up. In any case, since he was comprehending Tao under the reincarnation tree, he had no fear that his cultivation level would advance too rapidly. However, the first to break through was still Ling Han. He was already at the peak stage of medium extreme, and now, with the help of the reincarnation tree, the rate of his comprehension of Tao was practically like the speed of light. If an ordinary genius wanted to take this step, they would need a few hundred years' time at the very least. Even if Ling Han was a super genius, a few dozen years were still necessary, right? But underneath the reincarnation tree, a few dozen years would only become a few dozen days. Most importantly, Ling Han still had the essence of the demon master in him, which solved the problem of accumulation of origin power. Working on two tasks at the same time, what need did he have to worry about his cultivation level not speeding up in advancement? He drove the cloud-piercing shuttle out of the Great Ling Empire in advance, and headed to an empty, uninhabited plain to get through the heavenly tribulation. Since there were dark currents in the Great Ling Empire, and some wanted to rebel, he would give them the opportunity. Otherwise, if these ambitious people hid themselves, the danger they presented when they exploded in the future would be even bigger than now. Thus, Ling Han strictly sealed off news of his return. Now that he had to go through the heavenly tribulation, he naturally could not choose to do so in the Great Ling Empire. Advancing a minor level, to the present Ling Han, was practically a kind of torture. He had to shatter his body and allow his godly bones to be tempered by the tribulation so that they could improve to another level. This caused him to shout repeatedly in agony. If Ding Ping had heard his screams, the former would definitely feel much better. This freakish master could actually also experience a time when he would scream out so horribly. After half a day, the heavenly tribulation dispersed. Ling Han used a drop of indestructible true fluid, and his body instantly recovered. He felt that his power had spiked drastically, and his godly bones were incredibly hard, reaching the sturdiness of level 4 godly metal. Now, though I am still unable to suppress an opponent at the peak stage of consummate level, I can still be completely unafraid of him. Even if I have to resort to a drawn-out battle, I would be able to wear him out to death. Ling Han said, smiling. His defenses, added with his recovery ability, were practically shameless. As long as they could not insta-kill him, his opponent would definitely lose hope. Putting Ling Han aside, it would be the Rain Emperor who improved the fastest. The height of his talent was almost no inferior to Ling Han's. He was only not as fortunate as Ling Han had been, and had not obtained a black tower. 2 months later, the Rain Emperor's power had advanced to 19 stars of the Shattering Void tier. The might of the reincarnation tree was on full display. The Rain Emperor began to comprehend the secrets of immortal level, and with Ling Han and Shui Yenyu as consultants, he would definitely be able to break through in a mere few days' time with his talent. Of course, a few days of comprehending Tao under the reincarnation tree were equivalent to a few years of physically comprehending it. Another dozen or so days later, Feng Peiyun's power also advanced to 18 stars of Shattering Void tier, whereas Murong Qing had 17 stars. The gap between the four brothers' talent could also be perceived from this. The Rain Emperor was practically as talented as Ling Han, Feng Peiyun was slightly inferior, and Murong Qing was slightly inferior to Feng Peiyun. But even so, Shui Yenyu still got a scare. This was power of 17 stars of the Shattering Void tier. The battle prowess they could exhibit would at least be 22 stars, or perhaps even stronger than that one. How many geniuses of such caliber could be found in the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire? Yet the small Great Ling Empire actually had 4 of them. Furthermore, Helian Tianyun had also reached 16 stars, which was still very frightening, while Ling Han's disciple, Ding Ping, was also a little monster as he could increase his power 100-fold. If he could also attain power of 18 to 19 stars of the Shattering Void tier before he broke through, then when he broke into the immortal level, his battle prowess might even be able to surpass 6 stars. 6 stars, just the thought of it was frightening to Shui Yenyu. That was because a 5-star genius merely existed in legends, and now there had actually appeared a 6-star genius. Even Ling Han was no match for that. Ling Han was not about to be jealous of his own disciple. Strength was merely the most important part of battle prowess, but not all it was about. He was sure that if the Rain Emperor battled Ding Ping on the same cultivation level, it would definitely be Ding Ping who would lose. If it was against Ling Han, Ding Ping had even less hope for victory. His master's freakish physique and recovery abilities could not be dealt with. Additionally, Ling Han discovered that his present strength was increasing further and further. The 9 Dragons Tyrant Body Art and Universal 8 Desolation Technique were both supreme techniques, allowing his stamina to burst and his origin power to become pure. Vaguely, his pure strength would reach the height of 5 stars. Another several days later, the Rain Emperor, Feng Peiyun, and Murong Qing broke through into the Mountain River Tier 1 after another. The Great Ling Empire finally looked a sliver what a royal empire should be like. Chapter 1079, Words of Mutiny. In terms of who had advanced the most in cultivation levels, obviously Ding Ping was the one. In the beginning, he had just broken through to the spiritual infant tier. Now, 3 months later, he had already advanced to the Shattering Void tier. In total, he had advanced 3 major tiers and almost 30 minor levels. This was a feat that would cause one's head to go numb even if placed in the immortal realm. Apart from Ling Han, was there any other person who possessed a reincarnation tree? It looked like a short 3 months. Yet Ding Ping's true Tao comprehension time had actually spanned almost 90 years. Of course, one could only comprehend Tao with their spirit when cultivating under the reincarnation tree. Their physical body would remain at its initial cultivation level. In other words, Ding Ping's cultivation time wasn't genuinely 90 years. In any case, however, it was still definitely at least 30 years. Ding Ping was brimming with confidence right now. He yearned to surpass his 3 uncles and genuinely become helpful to Ling Han. The sight of Ling Han being taken away continued to replay itself in his mind. He didn't want to be separated from his master in such a way ever again. Ding Ping was willing to toil through hardships, and his talent was also outstanding to begin with. Coupled with the resources he had now, it was only natural that his cultivation improved at a rapid pace. Contrary to his incredible cultivation speed, the cultivation speed of the Rain Emperor, Helian Tianyun, and others all slowed down after they broke through to the immortal level. It was genuinely possible that they would be surpassed by Ding Ping, they would be caught up to at the very least. Ling Han was obviously delighted at Ding Ping's improvements. With a smile, he said, "Third brother, there's a strong possibility that Ding Ping will catch up to you. Big brother is also in danger of being caught up to. Second brother is the most talented, so unless Ding Ping comes across some fated opportunity, he most likely won't be able to catch up." Murong Qing couldn't help but let out a wretched wail. As a senior, it was far too humiliating to be surpassed by a junior. He grabbed Ling Han's arm and said, "Fourth brother, you definitely have to give me some special treatment. If you don't, you'll never hear the end of it." Just thinking about being surpassed was terrifying. Everyone erupted in laughter upon hearing this. "Third uncle, sit tight and wait for me to surpass you." Ding Ping was still carrying a huge boulder that had been carved with divine patterns of gravity on his back. He had become addicted to carrying huge boulders, and he even carried one as he slept. The others all joked that he was a turtle transformed into a human. There was another person who had seen great improvements in their cultivation, Rock Spirit. The Rock Spirit had seen almost no improvement in the past year or so, remaining at the Shattering Void tier. Once Ling Han returned, however, it naturally had rocks to eat again. After crunching on rocks for over 2 months, it transformed into a rock ball as if it had entered into hibernation. It didn't move for several days. However, it finally welcomed a period of explosive growth a few days ago, successfully advancing into the immortal level. Spirits of the 5 elements were different from demonic beasts. Demonic beasts could transform into human form after reaching the immortal level, whereas the rock spirit had always been in a humanoid form. It was just that its body was composed of stone. After advancing to the immortal level, however, the rock spirit finally became able to speak. Even so, the rock spirit didn't enjoy speaking. It remained the same as before, with its hobby being chewing on the leg of Ling Han's trousers and acting cute. This drew strong disdain from the Azura Demon Emperor. "You're not a bloody dog, so why are you trying to act like one? Woof, woof." He nudged the rock spirit as he barked. "Why is this rock spirit always competing with me? I'm the dog here, okay?" Ling Han didn't only help the Rain Emperor and his other friends. Rather, he even distributed spiritual herbs to the guards in the palace, allowing their cultivation to improve significantly. It was just that they didn't have the right to enter the Black Tower and cultivate under the reincarnation tree. After all, the reincarnation tree only provided a limited number of spots. Right now, it was only able to support the cultivation of 10 people at a time. Even so, the guards in the palace saw great improvements. In the past, their cultivation level was generally at the flower blossom tier. Now, however, they were breaking through to the spiritual infant tier one after another. Moreover, all of this had happened within a short span of 3 months. This was extremely astonishing. Ling Han turned to his disciple and said, "Ding Ping, return home for a few days. We'll set off for the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire in 1 month at most. Heavens knows when we'll be able to return again." In reality, Ding Ping didn't want to return home. To him, the Ding clan wasn't his home. It was merely a place where he had been born and where he had lived. However, he didn't dare go against his master's will. He packed his belongings and set off for home. The Ding Ping of now wasn't the same as the trash that he had been before. Rather, he was a personal disciple of the current emperor. Moreover, his own cultivation had also reached an impressive level. No one in the Ding clan knew that he was already at the Shattering Void tier. Anyhow, the spiritual infant tier was already a supreme level in the eyes of most people. Thus, he naturally received a warm welcome when he returned to the Ding clan. However, some people still gave him the cold shoulder, with others even showing hostility. This caused Ding Ping's heart to almost skip a beat. He was naturally aware of the hidden turbulences swirling through the government. There were some factions secretly scheming to usurp the great Ling Empire's throne and become rulers themselves. Ding Ping detested such people with all of his heart. His master had succeeded in opening the sky, freeing everyone from the evil claws of the 5 sects as a result. This had saved them from the fate of being refined into an alchemical pill. Moreover, his master had even been taken away as a hostage because of this. And yet, these people were actually planning to repay this debt with betrayal. He hoped that such traitorous trash didn't exist in the Ding clan. If they did, he would personally kill them. An elder waved at him and said, "Hee, Ding Ping, come. Come over here for a few words." This elder was called Ding Chang, and was an influential member of the Ding clan. He had been at the Flower Blossom tier in the small world, and he had initially thought that he would remain stuck at this tier and eventually die of old age. In a pleasant turn of events, he had received a great deal of benefits after Ling Han opened the sky. As a result, he had been able to advance to the spiritual infant tier in these past 2 years. This extended his lifespan by another 200 years. He had already lost his ambitions before all of this occurred. However, the fact that he could now live for 200 more years reignited his lust for power. 7th great-grandfather. Under Ling Han's influence, Ding Ping was still relatively respectful to his elders even though he didn't have any good impression of them. Ding Chang nodded, slightly flaunting his seniority. In his eyes, Ding Ping was still a junior of the Ding clan no matter how powerful he was. Thus, it was Ding Ping's obligation to act upon his wishes. He pointed to the seat in front of him, and said, "Sit." His expression became serious once Ding Ping sat down, and he said, "Pinger, it's been almost 2 years since His Majesty left, am I correct?" Ding Ping's heart jolted, yet his expression remained unchanged. Ling Han had taught him to remain calm and composed in all situations. He simply nodded, and said, "Master has indeed been away for almost 2 years. Pinger, there's a saying that a nation can't go a day without a ruler." Ding Chang chuckled as a startling glimmer burst to life in his aged eyes. It was lust for power, lust that made this elder seem like a giddy youth who had seen a beautiful woman for the first time. 7th great-grandfather, what are you trying to say? Ding Ping asked after a brief moment of hesitation. Ding Chang chuckled, and said, "You're the only disciple of His Majesty, so shouldn't you ascend the throne now that His Majesty has left, perhaps never to return?" Shwa. Ding Ping instantly stood up, and said, "7th great-grandfather, be careful with what you say. What kind of attitude is that?" Ding Chang flared up with rage. Was this brat trying to revolt? He actually dared to speak to him in such a disrespectful manner? 7th great-grandfather, you're drunk. Ding Ping waved his sleeves, and was about to leave. Ding Chang slammed the table, and roared, "Stop right there." Ding Ping ignored him and continued to walk forward. "Heh, young man, didn't you hear your elder telling you to stop?" A figure suddenly appeared before Ding Ping, blocking his path. "It's bad manners to disrespect your elders." Ding Ping trained his gaze on the person before him. He was a youth who was at most 24 or 25 years old. A sword was strapped to his back, and an astonishing sword intent radiated from his entire body. It was as if he were the sword, and the sword was him. "Who are you?" Ding Ping asked in a low voice. He could feel strong pressure from this youth, and it was clear that the cultivation level of this youth was no weaker than his. Shattering Void Tier. Chapter 1080, 5 Sects Reappear. Me? A smile appeared on the youth's face, and he said, "I'm Zhang Mo. I used to have a nickname, the Small Sword Emperor. However, there's no way I can keep that nickname anymore. This is the immortal realm, and if I still dare to call myself the Small Sword Emperor, someone will eventually beat me to death. Heaven's Sword Sect." Ding Ping said in a low voice. He finally understood that the 5 sects were the ones behind the hidden turbulences swirling in the government. Are these people pigheads? They already knew that the 5 sects had wanted to refine them into a realm pill, yet right now, they were still listening to their encouragement. They were going to betray Ling Han. Were fame and power truly that attractive? Could it really cause one to become so stubborn? Heh, what a coincidence, Zhang Yimou said indifferently. We had wanted to trick you into coming back, but who knew that you would come running back yourself? Ding Ping's feeling of apprehension disappeared now that the true culprits had revealed themselves. He had already reached the 3rd layer of the Shattering Void tier, and coupled with his devastating explosiveness, he could achieve a battle prowess of 12 stars. In addition, he could still draw on the power of the nation, and he furthermore possessed treasures that had been gifted to him by Ling Han. He wasn't afraid of anyone at the Shattering Void tier. Ding Ping wore a composed expression, and said, I'll never betray my master. So what if you guys capture me? Ha 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 ha. We only need a puppet. Ding Chang burst into laughter, and continued, You're Ling Han's disciple, so it's well within reason for you to ascend the throne. His face flushed red with excitement. He had never dreamed that a day would come when he could become the ruler of an empire. In fact, even his old buddy, which had shriveled long ago, became reinvigorated with life. He felt an urge to find some young woman to root. Sure enough, power was the strongest aphrodisiac for man. Retard. Zhang Yimou casually waved his palm, instantly forming a sword light that decapitated Ding Chang. Pung! Blood sprayed through the air. Ding Chang's head rolled along the ground for a few seconds before coming to a stop. A look of shock and surprise was frozen on his face. He couldn't understand why Zhang Yimou had suddenly attacked him. Weren't they allies? Weren't they going to rule the great Ling Empire together? Ding Ping didn't have a shred of sympathy for him. This person had betrayed Ling Han, and he had already been lenient by not personally killing him. He shook his head, and said, 7th great-grandfather, you were making a deal with the devil. They merely wanted to use you guys to lure me back. A glimmer flashed across Ding Chang's eyes. Then, it disappeared forever. He could have enjoyed an extra 200 years of peaceful life, and because of his relationship with Ding Ping, he even had an opportunity to reach the deity transformation tier or heaven tier. This was the immortal realm, after all, so treasures at the mortal level were widely available. However, he had lusted after power, a power that far surpassed what he could wield. In the end, his dreams were shattered, and he paid for it with his life. Are you going to surrender, or do I have to use force? Zhang Yimou asked calmly. He had always been a prodigy, and he had already reached the Shattering Void tier prior to Ling Han opening the sky. Now that he had cultivated in the immortal realm for almost 2 years, his cultivation level had already shot up to the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, his battle prowess soaring to 15 stars. This was thanks to the richness of the spiritual qi here, and also thanks to the fact that the 5 sects had quite some resources. This wasn't Zhang Mo's limit, though, and thus he didn't hurry to break through to the Mountain River tier. Instead, he planned to accumulate his cultivation and attempt to reach the supreme battle prowess of 20 stars. 15 stars of the Shattering Void tier wasn't enough to satisfy him. Ding Ping roared with laughter, and said, We'll only know who's stronger than who after we do battle. Heh, our intel is wrong. Who would have thought that you'd reach the Shattering Void tier so quickly? Zhang Yimou smiled, and continued, This attribute is quite similar to your master's. The speed of your cultivation is truly troublesome. I genuinely want to kill you now lest you become a larger threat in the future. If they had been able to kill Ling Han, the lower realm would have still belonged to the small world. If that had been the case, the great elites from the 5 sects would have been able to refine another realm pill soon. As for them, they would have also been able to enter the immortal realm soon. They wouldn't have ascended to the joint peace planet, but instead to the ancestral grounds of the 5 sects. They couldn't receive an inkling of the immortal realm's resources while on the joint peace planet. Living here was like living in a barren land, and this left them feeling extremely suffocated. In fact, it even made them feel despair. Thus, after lying low for 2 years or so, they decided to launch a fatal strike and change the ruler of the great Ling Empire. They would first use Ding Ping as a puppet emperor, and then kick him off the throne in the future. There would eventually come a day when they would finally re-establish contact with the 5 sects in the immortal realm, which would allow them to return to their ancestral grounds. Ding Ping balled his hands into fists, and said, "You can try if you want." He still had yet to battle against someone at an equivalent cultivation level after advancing to the Shattering Void tier. Although Ling Han had once suppressed his own cultivation level and fought against him, his freakish master was absolutely inhuman. He had been pummeled until despair was the only thing remaining in his mind. Zhang Yimou chuckled coldly as he raised his hand, and said, "Heh, even your confidence is like that of your master. That makes me even more infuriated." Shwa, shwa, shwa. Several sword lights swept toward Ding Ping. Zhang Yimou was called the Small Sword Emperor, so it was only natural that he was supremely talented in the sword Dao. Sword intent radiated from his body with his each and every action. Ding Ping was unafraid. He let out a mighty roar as he threw his fists outward. Pung! A powerful force compressed the air, forming a shield before Ding Ping and obliterating the sword lights. An expression of astonishment finally appeared on Zhang Mo's face. The battle prowess of Ding Ping was a bit beyond his expectations. He's clearly only at the 3rd layer of the Shattering Void tier, so how can he be so powerful? I'm still weaker than my master, but suppressing you should pose no problem at all. Pa, pa, pa. Ding Ping cranked his neck, causing explosive crackles to sound from the joints in his body. Although he hadn't been able to learn the indestructible Heaven Scroll, he had been able to learn the 9 Dragons Tyrant body art, which allowed him to set foot on a path of dual cultivation. This was also the reason behind his being able to wield power at 9 stars of the Shattering Void tier even though he was only at the 3rd layer of the Shattering Void tier. Moreover, his explosiveness could elevate his battle prowess to an even more terrifying level. Zhang Yimou seethed with rage. He came from the same generation as Ling Han, and there had even been a time when he had been able to suppress Ling Han. However, his opponent's disciple actually dared to say that suppressing him wouldn't be a problem? Fuck. He's far too arrogant. He drew his sword, and said, "Young man, you're far too arrogant." "I'm not arrogant, I'm confident." Ding Ping was in high spirits, and wouldn't be afraid no matter what opponent he came across. This was another quality that Ling Han had taught him. Of course, not being afraid and needlessly charging toward death were 2 completely different things. If he knew that he was no match for the opponent, he would do everything within his ability to retreat. Only by staying alive would he have any chance of turning the tables. How infuriating. Zhang Yimou humphed as he lashed out with his sword. He had nothing to worry about, and it didn't matter to him whether this was the Ding clan and whatnot. A brilliant sword ray that stretched for almost 300 meters instantly wreaked havoc and destruction. "Head out to fight." Ding Ping roared. If they were still in the small world, they could naturally soar into the sky to fight. However, their only option right now was to head outside. Petty kindness. Zhang Yimou couldn't care less. In his eyes, the people here were still ants from the small world. Before, they would still be useful as ingredients of the realm pill. Now, however, they had even lost this tiny amount of usefulness. That being the case, he had absolutely nothing to worry about. Boom! Buildings were destroyed and people were killed as the devastating sword ray swept through the Ding clan. This was an overwhelming power. "Damn you!" Ding Ping roared. He unleashed his full battle prowess as he charged toward Zhang Yimou. He had to prevent him from indiscriminately massacring people. Chapter 1081, March of the Rebels. Ding Ping battled against Zhang Yimou. In terms of cultivation, Ding Ping was 6 minor levels below Zhang Yimou. However, after unleashing all of his abilities, his battle prowess was surprisingly no weaker than that of Zhang Yimou. In fact, due to his outstanding stamina and the limitless power of the nation, he could easily outlast Zhang Mo if they were to fight a drawn-out battle. The two of them continued to battle, and the Ding clan's residence was transformed into a pile of rubble in no time at all. At least a third of the clan members had already been killed by the shock waves of the battle. Zhang Mo became more and more astonished as the battle progressed. He had initially thought that he would be able to easily capture Ding Ping. However, his opponent's battle prowess had far exceeded his expectations. If the battle continued in this direction, perhaps he would lose. This fact drove him crazy. So be it if he couldn't defeat Ling Han. That person was a freak, after all. In fact, even his master, his master's master, and the prodigies from the immortal realm couldn't defeat him. However, even Ling Han's disciple turned out to be so ferocious and powerful. How could he endure such humiliation? Who would have thought? Not only is Ling Han freakish, but even his disciple is not someone to be underestimated. A beautiful woman descended from the sky. There was a pair of wings on her back, and as they flapped lightly, they allowed her to soar in the sky. These wings had been useless in the small world as all those at or above the flower blossom tier possessed the ability to fly. However, everything was different in the immortal realm. Only those who reached the heavenly body tier could glimpse the secrets of heaven and earth, and thus gain the ability to roam the skies. However, how many cultivators at the heavenly body tier did the entire joint peace planet have? Thus, having wings in the immortal realm would allow one to realize the dream of flying at least several million years before others. This woman was Dong Linger, an excellent disciple of the Cloud Phoenix Sect. Due to the spiritual chi environment of the immortal realm, and due to the fact that they had arrived after opening the sky, the group of prodigies that Dong Linger was a part of had been blessed with fortune by heaven and earth. Of course, their blessings were similar to what other ordinary people had received, and couldn't be compared to Ling Han's. Even so, all of them had already reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. Humph. Enough with the sarcastic remarks. Help me suppress this brat. Zhang Mo was extremely displeased. Dong Linger smiled, and said, wasn't someone brimming with confidence just then saying that they wouldn't need any help? Her battle prowess was no weaker than that of Zhang Mo, and she could even fly on top of that. Thus, she naturally wasn't afraid of Ding Ping fleeing from their grasp. Zhang Mo humphed, and said, rubbish. Why don't you try to battle him yourself? This brat was almost as freakish as Ling Han had been. He possessed a body of incredible power that Zhang Mo barely dared to face head-on. Letting him flee will only lead to more trouble. We need to dispose of this brat as soon as possible. There are still several Shattering Void tier cultivators in the Imperial capital, after all. Dong Linger didn't throw any more barbs, and immediately jumped into the battle. There's no need to be afraid of the Shattering Void tier cultivators. It's that old dragon that we need to remain wary of, Zhang Mo said. Many of our seniors have already broken through to the immortal level. Once they join forces, that old dragon is nothing to worry about. Dong Linger was extremely ruthless, with each of her attacks aiming to cripple Ding Ping. In any case, they only needed a temporary puppet to ascend the throne. Thus, it would naturally be of no importance whether this puppet could cultivate or not. There was turmoil in Ding Ping's mind as he listened to their exchange. He knew that his opponents were purposefully saying this for him to hear. Their aim was to crush his fighting spirit. However, they would never have imagined that Ling Han had suddenly returned, and even created 4 Mountain River tier cultivators in a mere 3 months. Right now, there were close to 10 beings who had immortal level power in the Imperial capital. Moreover, the battle prowess of Ling Han and the Azura Demon Emperor was more so at the consummate level of the Mountain River tier. Taking into account the massive gulf in power after reaching the immortal realm, Ling Han could easily suppress these people with a single finger. Hold on. Ding Ping said in his mind. If he fled, would his opponents become wary and delay their attack? His master didn't have the spare time to muck around with these small fries. Their aim was to journey through the entire immortal realm. It's decided, then. Ding Ping suddenly retreated, only defending and not attacking. I'm willing to cooperate with you guys. However, you must guarantee that you won't hurt me or cripple my cultivation. Dong Linger and Zhang Mo exchanged a glance. They could see the strange look in each other's eyes. Why is this brat suddenly surrendering? Is it because he knows that he has no chance of winning against the two of us? Humans are afraid of death, after all. This brat is only in his teens, so such kind of fear will only be stronger. As a youth, he still has many lofty ambitions, so he naturally won't want to die. Fine. Dong Linger and Zhang Mo both nodded in agreement. Ding Ping was only at the Shattering Void tier, and as long as they brought him back, there would be many elites at the immortal level to keep him in check. This place wasn't the small world, where elites at the immortal level would be suppressed. Here, they could unleash their full strength. In front of elites at the immortal level, those at the Shattering Void tier were nothing but trash. Ding Ping barely uttered any words before he left with Dong Linger and Zhang Mo. They didn't use force to restrain him either. Both parties displayed a certain amount of sincerity. They traversed mountains and crossed rivers, eventually entering a lively and bustling city. This was where the 5 sects had headquartered. Sure enough, truly powerful forces secluded themselves in cities. All this while, the Rain Emperor and the others had been searching for the survivors of the 5 sects in secluded mountains and seas. Who would have thought that they would be blatantly living in such a bustling city? He followed Dong Linger and Zhang Mo's lead and entered a large manor. There was even a naturally formed lake in this manor, and the warm sunlight rippled across the surface of the water, making the already splendid environment appear even more tranquil. He who understands the times is a wise man. The Sword King appeared, yet he had already reached the mountain river tier at this moment. He didn't suppress his aura, and the sword intent exuded from his body was almost tangible, forming rings of sword shadows around his body. A casual flick from these sword shadows could easily kill a cultivator at the Shattering Void tier. He had already been informed about the events just then by Dong Linger and Zhang Mo. His suspicion hadn't been right, it had only been a short 2 years, after all. Ling Han definitely hadn't returned yet, and the strength of the imperial capital definitely wouldn't have seen any significant improvements either. On the contrary, how many people had the 5 sects sealed away using the time liquid in these past 10,000 years? After ascending to the immortal realm, at least 1/10 of them had broken through. Right now, they had almost 40 elites at the immortal level. This was an overwhelming force, and the only person that they were still wary of was Hellion Tianyun. That old dragon was extremely freakish, and after reaching the mountain river tier, his battle prowess was definitely terrifying. Tell us everything you know, the Sword King said. He had to learn all he could about Hellion Tianyun. Only then would he be able to form a flawless plan. Ding Ping didn't hesitate, and spilled everything he knew about Hellion Tianyun, from 3 months ago. The information was so detailed that even the Sword King was astonished. Brat, aren't you a little too cowardly? We're not even torturing you, yet you're already spilling your guts. The 5 sects also had some information on Hellion Tianyun, and after comparing it against what Ding Ping had told them, they discovered that Ding Ping had told them the absolute truth. They believed Ding Ping's intel. They concluded that Ding Ping was still too young, and was thus more worried about his own life and well-being. Since Ding Ping cooperated so readily, they didn't give him any more troubles. Perhaps they could use him as their dog in the future. After all, he was at the Shattering Void tier. They decided to launch their main assault on the imperial capital in 10 days. In the past few months, they had already contacted and joined forces with numerous other forces. All they were waiting for was to launch the final attack. Time flew by, and 10 days passed in a flash. Ding Ping obediently led the 5 sects, entering the city gates and marching through the imperial gates. They sneaked into the imperial palace, with several other forces gradually joining their rebel army. Ruling an empire required more than just tens or hundreds of people, after all. The rebel army quickly ballooned to several thousand strong, their might increasing by the minute. Chapter 1082, Obliterated with a Single Punch. The rebel army charged into the imperial palace, and the guards continually retreated, not even daring to oppose them. This caused the rebels to become especially smug. They were far too powerful, so powerful that even the imperial guards fled upon catching wind of their arrival. Although the elites from the 5 sects didn't believe that the imperial palace was genuinely this weak, they didn't give it a second thought. After all, they had sent their most powerful forces this time, with their army consisting of 37 elites at the immortal level. What could Hellion Tianyun do about them? If they sent 30 elites after him, they would be able to defeat him no matter what, right? In the meantime, the remaining 7 elites would be able to sweep through the imperial palace. Were it not for the fact that they needed more than just a few people to rule the empire, the 5 sects definitely wouldn't have allied themselves with so many other forces. These forces didn't even have cultivators at the shattering void tier. One side was advancing with irresistible might, and one side was collapsing into a disastrous heap. Ding Ping naturally knew that this was Ling Han cooperating with them. His aim was to destroy all of the rebels in one fell swoop. This time, they definitely had to exterminate all future threats. It wasn't long before the rebel army advanced into the depths of the imperial palace, arriving before the Hall of Righteous Harmony. This was the heart of the imperial palace, the hall where officials discussed affairs, and above which the totem of the empire was placed. This hall signified the power and rule of the great Ling Empire. If it collapsed, the power of the nation would suffer a critical blow. Thus, even if Ling Han was trying to lure them into a trap, he couldn't retreat anymore once they reached this hall. Feng Peyun, the Rain Emperor, Murong Qing, and Hellion Tianyun all appeared before the hall. Meanwhile, the guards of the imperial palace stood behind the 4 of them, drawing their sabers and wearing expressions of firm determination. Hee, bunch of pushovers, an elder from the 5 sects said with a chuckle. His name was Situjian, and he had been sealed away for several thousand years. He hadn't been awoken even when Ma Duobao had charged into the 5 sections. This was because quite a number of them hadn't been buried in the 5 sections. He had only been awakened after arriving in the immortal realm, and thus he naturally didn't know how powerful Ling Han was. He simply felt that the younger generations were too weak, not even being able to defeat this small country bumpkin. Dog, tell me your name. Hellion Tianyun roared. His tongue was the most toxic out of everyone present. Heh, so what if you're a descendant of the true dragons? Your battle prowess can surpass 4 stars at most. Don't tell me that you're a 5-star genius of the legends? Situjian waved his hand, and continued, follow the plan and suppress this sinful dragon first. He's got the bloodline of a true dragon. That's incredibly nutritious. 29 people immediately stepped forward to stand together with Situjian. They had naturally devised a plan already. These were the people tasked with dealing with Hellion Tianyun. Tisk, TSK, TSK. 30 powerful cultivators at the low extreme of the mountain river tier. Hellion Tianyun chuckled coldly, and said, however, you guys have mistaken something. Because I'm not the only elite at the immortal level. Feng Peyun, the Rain Emperor, Murong Qing, and the Rock Spirit all stepped forward, no longer suppressing their own auras. Might that was unique to immortals instantly enveloped the entire area. What? The 5 sects, along with their lapdogs, all cried out in astonishment. When had the great Ling Empire suddenly gained for more elites at the immortal level? This completely ruined their plans. Humph, you people. How has the great Ling Empire mistreated you? The Rain Emperor questioned. If it weren't for 4th brother opening the sky, you people would have only been able to await death in the small world, suffering the fate of being refined into a pill. However, you people are actually siding with the 5 sects now? Does your conscience not hurt? Looks of embarrassment appeared of the faces of many people. However, many more people replied with cold chuckles. As the saying went, he who understood the times was a wise man. Ling Han had been taken away as a hostage, leaving the great Ling Empire with only 1 immortal level elite. Okay, fine, there were 5 now. However, this was still nothing compared to the 5 sections. So, should they choose to die alongside the great Ling Empire, or should they choose to prosper alongside the 5 sects? This was the immortal realm, after all, so they didn't need to worry about being refined into a realm pill any longer. As such, they had no fundamental conflict with the 5 sects, meaning that there was naturally room for mutually beneficial cooperation. This is slightly beyond my expectations. However, you people have only just advanced into the immortal level. Sending out 5 more immortal level elites will suffice. Situ Jian was taken by surprise, yet he quickly regained his composure. He wasn't the strongest elite in the 5 sects, but he was the oldest. Thus, he became one of the leaders of this rebellion. Is this all of you? The Rain Emperor swept his gaze over the rebels. He had noticed the turmoil hiding beneath the surface of peace in the imperial capital since long ago. Meanwhile, the rebellious forces that had appeared were largely within his expectations. In fact, there were a few who had hidden themselves extremely well and not left any clues at all. However, was this all of them? We're more than enough to deal with you weaklings. Situ Jian chuckled coldly, and said, however, before this, I still need to kill one disobedient person. He looked toward Ding Ping. The Great Ling Empire actually had 4 other immortal level elites, yet Ding Ping hadn't told them anything about this. It was clear that he had purposefully withheld this information. Kill him. Situ Jian ordered coldly. He's just the sacrifice we need for our flag. He was a hawk, and believed that they should directly change the flag of the empire after annihilating the Rain Emperor and the others. There was absolutely no need for them to use a puppet emperor as a buffer. However, he was only one of many leaders, so he couldn't act as he pleased. Now that Ding Ping had tricked them, he saw an opportunity to advance his case. Peng! Ding Ping was tossed out. Although his battle prowess was impressive, he was still helpless against strength at the immortal level. Kneel. Situ Jian said coldly. He was going to behead Ding Ping before everyone else. Pay! Ding Ping spat, not afraid of Situ Jian in the least. I'm telling you to kneel. Situ Jian raised his voice, his eyes sinister and radiating with might that was unique to immortals. He was going to break Ding Ping's mind and force him to submit. Heh, are you threatening my disciple? Ling Han's voice traveled into their ears. Yeah. The Sword King, Azure Phoenix Divine Empress, and others were all astonished. They had suffered greatly at Ling Han's hands, so they were naturally familiar with his voice. Their minds instantly became numb with fear. Meanwhile, Situ Jian looked toward the source of the voice, and roared, "Who is it?" Ling Han walked out, a faint smile on his face. "Who are you?" Situ Jian asked. Ling Han. The Sword King and others of the older generation, as well as Zhang Mo and the others of the younger generation, all yelped in shock. They had developed fear of Ling Han, and their minds had already gone numb with fear upon hearing his voice. Now that they saw him in person, they couldn't help but tremble in terror. Even those at the Shattering Void tier and immortal level were terrified upon seeing him. This highlighted just how huge an influence Ling Han had on these people. Situ Jian looked toward Ling Han, and asked, "You're Ling Han?" He hadn't experienced the Ling Han era, so he naturally didn't know just how terrifying Ling Han was, nor could he imagine it. Pa! There was a flash and a punch, and Situ Jian's head instantly exploded like a blooming flower. He became a headless corpse. There was deathly silence. Although Situ Jian wasn't the most powerful immortal level elite of the 5 sects, he was still an immortal level elite no matter what. Yet his head had actually been obliterated with a single punch? Gasp! Was this some kind of sick joke? Ling Han smiled widely as he retracted his fist and said, "Since you've all arrived, it's time to settle the score." Chapter 1083, Quashing the Rebellion. Ling Han had returned, and he was incredibly powerful. The members of the 5 sects had already developed a fear of Ling Han, and they could only tremble in fear upon seeing him appear. Now that Situ Jian had been killed, they felt an ominous chill shoot through their bodies. All they wanted to do was turn around and flee. Ling Han. The Sword King stepped forward. Although he was relatively young in the 5 sects, his strength was quite outstanding. Sword cultivators were renowned for their powerful attacks, and his battle prowess could definitely rank in the top 10 or even top 5 of the 5 sections. Pa! Ling Han swung his fist as he dashed over, and the head of the Sword King was also smashed into pulp. Gasp! Ling Han had killed someone at the slightest of provocations. How ruthless! Ling Han, you've gone too far. You have to realize that there are Sun Moon tier elites at our ancestral grounds, the Severing Heaven Saber roared. Pa! His head was obliterated just as he finished speaking. Ling Han had killed 3 people in a row, each of them with a single punch. There had been no hesitation, and there had been no mercy. What kind of resolution and killing intent was this? The members of the 5 sects were all shaken to the core. None of them had seen how Situ Jian and the 2 others had been killed. They had merely seen a flash, and then the elites had died one after another. If they became the target, there was no way they would be able to block or escape either. How terrifying! Zhang Mo and the others of the younger generation all trembled in terror. It had only been 2 years, yet what kind of terrifying level had Ling Han advanced to? What cultivation level are you at? The Azure Phoenix Divine Empress asked, a bitter expression on her face. My improvements have only been minimal. I feel ashamed to tell you guys. Ling Han smiled, and said, I'm at the high extreme of the mountain river tier. I've only just broken through to its early stage. Pooh. The rebels all spluttered and choked. You're showing off, you're definitely showing off. He had only opened the sky 2 years ago, and everyone had started off from the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. However, the members of the 5 sects had cultivation techniques from the immortal realm, and it was because of this that 37 people had been able to advance to the immortal level. But Ling Han? He genuinely had no background, and had even been taken away as a hostage. Are you sure you were a hostage and not some elite son-in-law? Run! It was unclear who cried out, but all of the rebels instantly turned around to flee. The members of the 5 sects were far too familiar with the might of immortal-level elites. They even more so knew that there existed a massive gulf in power between each sub-minor level of the immortal levels. Thus, 1-star geniuses were already outstanding prodigies. However, Ling Han had actually reached the high extreme, so he definitely possessed a crushing advantage over them. Even 370 of them would be annihilated by Ling Han, much less a mere 37. What was the point of fighting? They would definitely be killed if they stayed and fought. Die. The morale of the Great Ling Empire couldn't be any stronger as they charged toward the rebels. The Rain Emperor and the other immortal level elites were especially fervent as they had just advanced into the immortal level. They were itching to try their hands out. Run! The Azure Phoenix Divine Empress unfurled her wings as she grabbed onto Dong Linger. She and Dong Linger both possessed unique bloodlines that allowed them to fly after reaching the mountain river tier. This gave them a huge advantage over others at the same cultivation level. The Rain Emperor swung his fist toward them. Although the Azure Phoenix Divine Empress was a bit disheveled after barely managing to block it, she was still able to soar into the sky. Who could stop them from leaving now that they were in the sky? Ling Han, just you wait. You're dead meat once I find my way to the ancestral grounds of the 5 sects, the Azure Phoenix Divine Empress shouted. She knew that the 30 or so immortal level elites were no match for someone at the high extreme. This wasn't a battle, this was a one-sided massacre. Ling Han shook his head, and said, I had planned to spare you as a favor to her, yet you insist on seeking death. He used his body like a bow as he notched the annihilating dragon star arrow. Xiao! The arrow transformed into a streak of light as it whizzed through the air. What cultivation level did he possess right now? Even if he didn't use a real bow, and even if he didn't use the ultimate arrow, the might of his annihilating dragon star arrow could still reach 5 stars. How could a mere cultivator at the early stage of the low extreme block a battle prowess at the middle stage of the consummate level? Pooh! The Azure Phoenix Divine Empress and Dong Linger both cried out in agony as the arrow pierced through their hearts. The life instantly drained from masters' and disciples' eyes, and the color instantly drained from their faces as they plummeted to the ground. Ling Han didn't pity them in the least. Since they were enemies, what did it matter whether they were men or women? With him and the Azura Demon Emperor present, the 5 sects' advantage in numbers didn't count at all. They still couldn't escape the fate of being massacred. Moreover, although the Rain Emperor and the others had only just broken through, they had been able to comprehend Tao under the reincarnation tree. Which of them hadn't experienced decades of comprehension? Moreover, they had received plenty of resources from Ling Han, with all of them reaching an almost perfect level at the Shattering Void tier. Even Murong Qing had a battle prowess of 4 stars, and the Rain Emperor more so had a battle prowess of 5 stars. In fact, Ling Han didn't even need to act. Just his 3 brothers alone would be able to defeat all of the rebels. In only an hour, all of the elites of the 5 sects had already been killed. Of course, the cultivators at the Shattering Void tier had also followed the immortal level elites over. They were also ruthlessly killed. "Please spare us, Your Majesty." The remaining rebels all dropped to their knees and begged for their lives. Their cultivation level was too low, with none of them having reached the Shattering Void tier yet. They were utterly insignificant in this kind of battle, and just a small shred of power could flatten all of them to the ground. Who would have thought that Ling Han would actually appear at this time? Who would have thought that he'd be as powerful as a deity? This reminded them of when Ling Han had opened the sky. He had borne the weight of the sky as he shattered the heavens, appearing extremely mighty and divine. They had actually tried to rebel against such a person? Fuck. Had they gone retarded? Seize them. Take them out the gates and behead them. Ling Han ordered coldly. There were some lines that couldn't be crossed. Otherwise, how would he rule the empire, and how would he control the populace? A thought flashed through his mind, and the cultivation of all the rebels was crippled. The Imperial Guards rushed over and seized the rebels, purposefully punching and kicking them as they did so. Of course these Imperial Guards hated the rebels. Ling Han had done so much for the lower realm, yet these people actually used the opportunity while he was a hostage to launch a rebellion. Fuck. They genuinely wanted to kill these animals now. Ling Han announced his return through the totem. Taking this opportunity, he also explained the events of the rebellion. His voice boomed through every corner of the great Ling Empire. Long live the Emperor! His Majesty has returned. Everyone whooped in joy. Ordinary people were all realists. They didn't care who was the Emperor as long as their lives were peaceful and plentiful. As long as these were satisfied, the Emperor was a good Emperor. Ling Han had saved them from the fate of being refined into a realm pill. He had saved their lives. He had also taken them into the immortal realm, where spiritual qi was rich. Although not everyone could cultivate, the environment here meant that they wouldn't fall sick, allowing their lifespan to extend by many years. Living to 100 years old was no problem at all. This was a massive favor. Who wouldn't respect such a good emperor? Yet there were actually heartless animals who desired to usurp him. Fuck. Countless people brought eggs, apples, and oranges to witness the executions outside the palace gates. They were going to smash the rebels' faces with rotten eggs and fruits, causing them to stink even in their graves. Ling Han invited Yu Kaiyu, Qian Wuyong, Hu Fengyue, and his other old friends into the imperial palace. He hadn't wanted to reveal that he had returned before, so he hadn't reunited with these old friends. Now that the survivors of the 5 sects had been dealt with, he naturally had to reunite with these people. Ling Han started to hand out large amounts of alchemical pills again. Chapter 1084, Majestic Heaven Sect. A powerful nation couldn't rely on the abilities of only a few people. Ling Han, the Rain Emperor, and the others all strove for great things. This was especially the case for Ling Han, who also had to find the Rock Palace and the ancestral grounds of the 5 sections. How could he remain on the joint peace planet forever? Thus, they had to work hard to groom successors. Since they had split the sky and brought the small world into the immortal realm, they naturally had to give her a brighter future. Everyone improved in leaps and bounds with Ling Han's selfless help. Ling Han had the most hopes for Shinzhongchen, Xianyuan Ziguang, and Wen Yijian. Shinzhongchen and Wen Yijian were both supremely talented in martial arts, while Xianyuan Ziguang's heaven-defying fortune hadn't disappeared after he had arrived in the immortal realm. He had somehow obtained some natural treasures, and these had allowed him to become the first of the 3 to reach the Shattering Void tier. These people didn't seek to compete with Ling Han any longer, and all wanted to place their full focus on cultivation and developing the great Ling Empire into a behemoth of the immortal realm. Ling Han didn't treat them unfairly, either. It could be said that apart from the reincarnation tree, they enjoyed all the benefits that Ling Han could give them. It was just that without the help of the reincarnation tree, advancing to the immortal level would take them at least 10 years. This estimate was already extremely optimistic. It wouldn't come as a surprise even if it took them several centuries to reach the immortal level. They only had limited resources, after all. As they were followers of Ling Han, Qin Yi, Guang Yuan, Zhu Wujiao, Yuan Chenghe, and the others were naturally treated better. They could comprehend Tao under the reincarnation tree, and even if Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujiao weren't especially talented, cultivating under the reincarnation tree could still help them reach the immortal level even if they were as stupid as pigs, and they couldn't be worse than pigs, right? The Alchemist Society had become subordinate to the Great Ling Empire, and Ling Han didn't keep his knowledge to himself either. He imparted his experience and a large number of pill recipes, and believed that once these alchemists developed fully, the development of the Great Ling Empire would enter a positive cycle of growth. At that time, the reliance on him would become much smaller. Lin Xiangqin, Wenren Xianxian, and the other beauties were all happy yet despondent at the same time. They had once had the opportunity to win this godlike man over, yet it was a shame that they had seen their opportunities slip by due to all kinds of reasons and circumstances. Now, they could only look up to him. Another month passed, and Ling Han decided to return to the Scarlet Heaven Academy. He hadn't notified the academy of his destination when he had left. After all, it would have been extremely troublesome had the Dark Night Hall, Sha Yuan, or Zhao Luan targeted him and sent an elite at the Sun Moon tier after him. However, if he were absent for too long, these powerful forces would definitely still be able to discover his whereabouts. How could the Great Ling Empire stand up against Sun Moon tier elites? Thus, they all decided to return to the Scarlet Heaven Academy as soon as possible. They were still very weak now, yet Ling Han had made far too many powerful enemies. They had to lie low and endure for the time being. The Rain Emperor and the others all teased Ling Han about this, saying, "Fourth brother, although you're tremendously talented, it seems like those that you've offended are even more talented. You're only at the high extreme of the Mountain River tier right now, yet there are at least several elites at the Heavenly Body tier who want to kill you." To this, Ling Han replied, "Those who don't draw jealousy are mediocre people. This proves that I'm supremely talented." Ling Han handed the affairs of the empire to his uncle, Yuzhen Shan. With his help, Yuzhen Shan had already reached the Shattering Void tier. Although this was insignificant in the immortal realm, it was still fairly impressive in the Great Ling Empire. At the very least, his battle prowess could soar to 15 stars after drawing on the power of the nation. Ling Han placed everyone in the Black Tower before setting off on his cloud-piercing shuttle with Shui Yenyu. They landed outside the Point Star City after 10 or so days, and everyone exited the Black Tower and then walked toward the city gates. Since they were going to live in the imperial capital for a long time, they all had to obtain a legal identity. Thus, they naturally had to enter the city gates properly. They entered the city after registering their identities and paying the entrance fee. The Rain Emperor and the others were temporarily settled in the pharmacy. Ling Han would use his power and relationships to help them get into the Scarlet Heaven Academy. He was already quite influential now, so helping others get into the academy was well within his abilities. Although this was an illegal way of entering the academy, the Rain Emperor and the others were all supreme talents. Thus, them entering the Scarlet Heaven Academy was actually a win-win situation. However, another piece of news traveled over before Ling Han could even act on his plan. The Majestic Heaven's Sect was recruiting disciples. What kind of force was the Majestic Heaven's Sect that news of them recruiting disciples could actually cause the entire city to bubble with excitement? Ling Han asked around, and found that this Majestic Heaven's Sect was indeed impressive. The Joint Peace Planet, Flying Cloud Planet, Light Dragon Planet, and another 100 or so planets formed a large galaxy one. The cultivation level of these planets was similar, with the heavenly body tier being the strongest. However, there was a super elite at the Eternal River tier on the Flying Cloud Planet. Not everyone was interested in fame, money, and power, though, and this super elite at the Eternal River tier was respectfully referred to as Venerable Trinity. It was rumored that he had been battling at the passageway of the two realms this entire time, and had only returned to the Flying Cloud Planet several tens of thousands of years ago. He hadn't founded an imperial empire. Empires founded by elites at the Eternal River tier were called imperial empires and had instead founded the Majestic Heaven Sect. He recruited a large number of disciples and students. The founding mission of the sect was to raise prodigies who could battle against the netherworld. It was a large sect with a transcendent standing, and although Venerable Trinity was a super elite at the Eternal River tier, he didn't aspire to become a supreme ruler. Who didn't wish to enter this sect or perhaps even become a disciple of Venerable Trinity himself? Who didn't desire to listen to him explain the true meaning of the Great Tao? To say nothing of the Eternal River tier, if one could enter this sect, there was a great chance that they could become an elite of the Heavenly Body tier, right? Wasn't this impressive enough? An envoy from the Majestic Heaven Sect had arrived several days ago, and notified the three Majestic Empires that the Majestic Heaven Sect was preparing to recruit a new cohort of disciples. When the time came, the Majestic Heaven Sect would send personnel to examine those who had expressed their interest. Those who satisfied the requirements would be recruited as disciples and sent to the Majestic Heaven Sect to comprehend the Great Tao. This examination would take place in 1 month's time. Ling Han scrapped his plans to help the Rain Emperor and the others get into the Scarlet Heaven Academy after learning of this. Wouldn't entering the Majestic Heaven Sect be even better? Ling Han informed the Rain Emperor and the others about this, and they all agreed with his decision. Hee, little Qing, your talents mightn't be enough to get you into the Majestic Heaven Sect. Helian Tianyun said with a chuckle. Murong Qing humphed, and said, don't forget that I broke through after reaching 17 stars of the Shattering Void tier. How many stars did you reach? Wayaya. Helian Tianyun roared, and said, I directly broke through to the immortal level after activating my ancestral bloodline. If I had cultivated for a few more years, I might have been able to reach 20 stars of the Shattering Void tier, much less 17 stars of the Shattering Void tier. This was his sore spot. Ling Han swept his gaze around. Apart from his three brothers, Helian Tianyun, and Ding Ping, his cousin Yu Kaiyu and his 4 followers Guang Yuan, Qin Yi, Yuan Shenghe, and Zhu Wu had all followed him over. Meanwhile, the rock spirit had stayed back to guard the great Ling Empire. In any case, it could maintain its extremely fast pace of cultivation as long as Ling Han sent some rocks back from time to time. If their aim was to enter the Scarlet Heaven Academy, apart from Guang Yuan and Zhu Wu, there would naturally be no problems at all for everyone else. However, if their aim was to enter the Majestic Heaven Sect, everything would be uncertain. How strict were the requirements for entering the sect? Ling Han was confident that he and the Rain Emperor would easily qualify to enter. If even they couldn't enter, then this sect definitely wasn't recruiting prodigies. Instead, they would be recruiting freaks. Ling Han would adjust his plans according to the outcome. Those who qualified would enter the Majestic Heaven Sect, while he would find a way to get those who didn't into the Scarlet Heaven Academy. Ling Han returned to the academy. He planned to visit Old Man Su as there was a possibility that he knew more about the Majestic Heaven Sect. Senior Brother Ling. Senior Brother Ling. However, a fellow student suddenly knocked on his door, appearing extremely short of breath. Chapter 1085, Sword Delivery from Zhihui. What happened? Ling Han asked. The student hesitated for a moment before answering. I passed by the main gates of the Eastern Institution just then, and I saw someone being cornered by the students of the Eastern Institution. He kept saying that he wanted to visit you. Visit me? Ling Han stroked his chin in thought. Who could this be? Someone who wished to visit him had actually gone to the Eastern Institution? Who didn't know that the 4 major institutions of the Scarlet Heaven Academy were extremely hostile toward one another? Weren't you humiliating the Eastern Institution by saying that you wanted to visit Ling Han there? It was evident that this person only knew that he was at the Scarlet Heaven Academy, and not which specific institution he was in. It was because of this that they had accidentally fallen into a wolf's den. Is there anything special about that person? Ling Han asked. The student who had delivered the news pondered for a moment before saying, he's fairly ordinary. That's right. He's always hugging a sword to his chest. Ling Han was slightly surprised. Could it be Zhihui, the heir to the Swordforge Manor? He had indeed made a promise with Zhihui. If Zhihui succeeded in forging the number 1 divine sword in the world, he would personally deliver it to Ling Han. Only a year had passed, yet Zhihui had already succeeded. No matter what, it's best that I head over first. Thanks. Ling Han tossed a vial of pills toward the student who had delivered the news. An excited expression spread across the student's face as he caught the vial and opened it, revealing the emerald green pill inside. Senior Brother Ling is so generous. He rewarded me with a heavenly pearl pill for delivering a simple message. Ling Han directly strode into the Eastern Institution's territory, couldn't be bothered walking around to avoid it, and headed straight for its main gates. The uniforms of the 4 institutions were all unique in their own ways. Thus, Ling Han quickly attracted the attention and stares of the students from the Eastern Institution once he boldly entered their territory. They all knew who Ling Han was. Not only was his battle prowess impressive, but he had more so become a 7th-rank military officer of the Majestic Empire. First of all, they couldn't defeat him. Second of all, who wanted to offend a prodigy who also had an official rank? As a result, the students simply spectated and followed behind Ling Han, all of them walking with him toward the main gates. The students all wore strange expressions when they realized that Ling Han's destination was the main gate. Fuck. You're not barging into the Eastern Institution simply to take a shortcut, right? Holy fuck. How much are you looking down on the Eastern Institution? This is downright humiliation. The students of the Eastern Institution were all seething with anger. Although Ling Han had neither said a word nor hit a person, the students all felt as if they had been slapped across the face. So high profile. So triggering. How can he be so arrogant? Ling Han, you've gone too far. A powerful student finally appeared and blocked Ling Han's path. Everyone knew that Ling Han was still at the peak stage of the medium extreme now, and they also knew that his battle prowess could perhaps surpass 5 stars. As such, his genuine battle prowess was at the early stage of the consummate level. If one wanted to block Ling Han, this was the minimum cultivation level that they needed to possess. This student was at the early stage of the consummate level, and he could surpass around half a star. His strength was relatively impressive. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, I'm just taking a shortcut because I don't want to walk around. This is the Eastern Institution, the student shouted sternly. Regardless of whether it's the Eastern Institution or Northern Institution, they're all part of the Scarlet Heaven Academy, Ling Han said. I can naturally go wherever I want. A sinister expression appeared on the student's face, and he said, since you won't listen to my polite warning, I can only use force. He immediately charged toward Ling Han after saying this. According to Academy rules, students at a higher cultivation level couldn't actively attack students at a lower cultivation level. However, who told Ling Han to barge into the Eastern institution? He had already barged into someone else's home, so wasn't it only natural that they counterattacked? Thus, what did it matter if he beat Ling Han up? He was the one in the right. Ling Han clasped his hands behind his back. The moment his opponent's attack arrived, he suddenly extended 2 fingers as if they were swords, creating a burst of sword light. Fast technique. After comprehending Tao under the reincarnation tree, Ling Han had already developed a profound understanding of the fast technique. One had to realize that the reincarnation tree had already experienced 4 months, or 120 days, of growth. In other words, comprehending Tao under the reincarnation tree during this time would be equivalent to 120 years. Even with a conservative estimate, this time would be at least 50 years, right? With Ling Han's strong comprehension ability, how could he not grasp the essence of the fast technique after comprehending it for 50 years? Pooh! Blood instantly spurted from the student's chest. Ling Han didn't stop, and continued to walk toward the main gate. Only at this moment did the student finally crash onto the floor, unconscious. No one knew whether he had been beaten unconscious by Ling Han or fainted due to anger. Too powerful. The other students were all stunned. That senior brother was an elite at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Yet, Ling Han defeated him in a single strike. How terrifying is his power? More importantly, how many years has it been since Ling Han entered the academy? Most students who entered in the same cohort as him are still striving to have a battle prowess of 20 stars of the Shattering Void tier. But him? His battle prowess has already soared to the consummate level of the Mountain River tier. His battle prowess is at least equivalent to the middle stage of the consummate level. Otherwise, there's no way he could have defeated senior brother in a single strike. No one dared to challenge Ling Han anymore. After all, elites at the consummate level didn't have so much free time to be always strolling around outside. They were always cultivating in seclusion. However, what face would the Eastern institution have if they allowed Ling Han to casually barge through without any obstruction? People instantly went to seek help from other senior brothers and sisters from the consummate level division. They had to stop Ling Han no matter what. The main gates quickly appeared in their sights. Ling Han walked over, and sure enough, he saw several dozen students standing at the gates and surrounding a youth. However, the sword in his hands was already gone. This youth was none other than Zhihui. "Give me the sword back." "Give it back." Zhihui shouted. A silver-haired student standing at the gates had a sword in his hands, and he was the person who Zhihui was currently shouting at. "Senior brother Yang, what do you think about this sword?" a student asked. "Hee, this person is bragging and saying that this is the #1 sword in the world. However, I don't see anything special about it," a student next to the silver-haired male said. "Huh, the #1 sword in the world? What an absolute joke." The silver-haired male roared with laughter as he waved the sword, and said, "This sword is merely forged from level 1 godly metal. Although I can't tell what material it's forged from, I know that it's definitely a level 1 material. Moreover, although there are some divine patterns carved into it, there's no way to activate them. This sword can't even be classified as a level 1 god tool. #1 sword in the world? This is nothing but a trash sword." A furious expression appeared on Zhihui's face, and he shouted, "This is the #1 sword in the world. You don't understand at all. Give it back to me." The silver-haired male chuckled coldly, and said, "Haha, although it's a trash sword, it's already in my hands. You still want to take it back? Keep dreaming." This male was called Yang Shuang, and he was a super genius in the consummate level division of the Eastern institution. "Press him down onto the floor." He actually dared to mention Ling Han's name before my face? He's asking for a beating. Okie dokie. Several students instantly rushed over and pressed Zhihui down onto the ground, forcing him to kneel on his knees. In fact, they even went as far as to force his head into the ground. "Let me go. Give me my sword back," Zhihui shouted. Ling Han shook his head. These people were treating a disciple of the Swordforge Manor so violently. How were they going to get a sword forged from the Swordforge Manor in the future? He strode over with confidence, and said, "Brother Jean, long time no see." There was an aura of rage exuding from Ling Han's body. Jean Zhihui was definitely delivering a sword for him as per their agreement. However, he had ended up being humiliated by these people. This infuriated Ling Han immensely. Ling Han. The students at the gates couldn't help but exclaim Ling Han's name. Chapter 1086, Venting Anger. Ling Han was definitely a legend in the Scarlet Heaven Academy. He had only entered the academy for a mere 2 years, yet he had already reached the medium extreme of the mountain river tier. Moreover, he possessed an astonishing battle prowess, and he was perhaps a legendary 5-star genius. His feats were even more astounding as he had not only fought frequently against the only child of great General Zhao, but he had even had the upper hand when clashing with him. The Empress had more so appointed him as a 7th-rank military officer. Ling Han was the youngest 7th-rank military officer in the history of the Majestic Empire. In fact, many students in the Eastern institution lamented why Ling Han had entered the academy so soon. If he had entered the Scarlet Heaven Academy 5 years later, wouldn't he have become a prodigy of the Eastern institution? Yang Shuang faltered for a moment before roaring, "Ling Han, you actually dare to barge into our Eastern institution?" Ling Han frowned, and said, "Release him and return the sword. Then we can speak about other things." "Huh, this person is really your friend?" Yang Shuang chortled loudly, and stomped onto Jean Zhihui's face before saying, "What if I don't?" He wasn't afraid of Ling Han, as he had a battle prowess at the late stage of the consummate level. If Ling Han fought against him, he would merely be seeking humiliation. A cold glint flashed across Ling Han's eyes, and he said, "I'll cut off that leg of yours." Yang Shuang roared with laughter. What an absolute joke. Yang Shuang used the sword to point at Ling Han, and said, "Ling Han, are you feeling a little too good about yourself? Do you really think that you're invincible in this academy?" Ling Han didn't reply, instead striding toward Yang Shuang. His expression was dark, and his rage had almost become tangible, making it difficult for those around him to breathe. "Beat him to a pulp." Yang Shuang roared. Ling Han was kidding, right? This was the Eastern institution. Go. The students from the Eastern institution all charged over. They had actually allowed Ling Han to swagger all the way from the Northern institution to the main gates of the Eastern institution. This was utter humiliation, and if the students of the Eastern institution allowed him to return safely, there would be no need for them to cultivate any longer. They might as well buy a block of tofu and slap themselves to death. A dozen or so fists instantly smashed toward Ling Han. Ling Han activated his divine patterns of gravity with a thought. Pa, 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 pa. The assailants were unable to get near him, and were immediately pressed flat onto the floor by the overwhelming force of extreme gravity instead. Following the increase of Ling Han's cultivation level, his divine patterns of gravity also became more powerful. At the very least, they couldn't be withstood by those under the consummate level of the mountain river tier. He continued forward, and students around him fell like dominoes. Not a single person managed to pose any real threat to him. Unease gripped at Yang Shuang's heart. He was already standing face to face with Ling Han, and there were no more obstacles between the two of them. Theoretically speaking, his battle prowess was higher than that of Ling Han, so he shouldn't have been feeling any unease. However, he was experiencing an indescribable feeling of irritation for some reason, and this made him especially anxious. Kneel down and apologize to Brother Jean. If Brother Jean is willing to forgive you, then that will be the end of this matter. Otherwise, I'll have you know the meaning of the word regret. Ling Han's voice was dripping with malice. T. Yang Shuang flared up in rage. He lifted his foot off Jean Zhihui's face and immediately launched a kick toward Ling Han. Ling Han also threw a kick. Pung! Their legs collided, and both of them stumbled backward. Yang Shuang was stunned, and he stammered, "Why, you broke through to the high extreme." Not only that, but Ling Han's power was actually on par with his. His head went numb with shock. He had cultivation at the middle stage of the consummate level, and his power was identical to his consummate level. His battle prowess could also surpass 1 star. His opponent was only at the early stage of the high extreme, yet his power was already on par with his. What did this signify? This signified that Ling Han's power could surpass 5 stars. On the Joint Peace Planet, 5-star geniuses only existed in legends. It was possible that the Empress was a 5-star genius, though no one had ever proved this to be true. Right now, however, someone was actually able to surpass 5 stars with their power alone. How could Yang Shuang not be shocked? Won't your battle prowess surpass 6 stars if you learn a few more ultimate techniques? Moreover, it's only been 2 years, yet you've already reached the high extreme. How can one cultivate so fast? Kneel down. Ling Han extended his hands toward Yang Shuang. Never. Never. Yang Shuang shouted as he counterattacked. He definitely couldn't allow himself to be defeated by Ling Han. Ling Han's fists and palms continued to rain down. They were as powerful as mountains, and as fierce as flames. He realized that he had underestimated his own battle prowess. Before he knew it, his power had already reached a stage where it could surpass 5 stars. Add to that his divine patterns of gravity and divine patterns of flame, and his battle prowess was already powerful enough to surpass 6 stars. Of course, this was before taking into account his annihilating dragon star arrow or the fast technique. At his peak, his battle prowess was completely capable of surpassing 7 stars. In fact, he could even fight against a cultivator at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier in a fair battle. Taking into account his physique and recovery ability, it was entirely possible for him to claim invincibility in the mountain river tier. Ling Han activated his fast technique and said, "If I want to suppress you, then you can only be suppressed." His strikes were swift and fierce, and as his fingers moved, sword chi swept through the air like swords flying from beyond the highest heavens. Yang Shuang howled in pain as he was continuously struck by Ling Han's attacks. Blood sprayed through the air, and although his wounds were all shallow, he still appeared to be in an extremely sorry state. Even senior brother Yang was being trampled on now. How many people in the Eastern institution could still oppose Ling Han? Pung! Ling Han finally beat Yang Shuang down with a punch. He snatched the sword from his hands before helping Zhihui back up, and saying, "Brother Jin, are you okay?" "I'm fine, my wounds aren't severe," Zhihui replied as he crawled up. Several of his bones were broken, but this was nothing serious to cultivators. If one had good quality pills, such wounds could be healed in just a few days. Ling Han nodded before turning back to Yang Shuang, and saying, "I said that I would cut off that leg of yours. You didn't think I was joking, did you? You dare?" Yang Shuang trembled in fright and said, "This is the Eastern institution. The Academy won't let you off lightly if you commit such acts of violence." Shua! Ling Han unsheathed the sword. There was a flash of sword light, and one of Yang Shuang's legs had already been cut off. "This is my friend. Moreover, this sword was also specially delivered over by my friend. You snatched my sword, so it's only natural that I targeted you. I've already given the Academy face by not slicing your head off. Don't you know that it's a serious crime to steal from officials of the Majestic Empire?" Yang Shuang only remembered to howl in pain after being dazed for a moment. After listening to Ling Han's reasoning, he felt even more gloomy and depressed. Just as Ling Han had said, it was a serious crime to steal from officials of the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire. However, the matter of him stealing the sword could be severe or insignificant. After all, the sword hadn't been delivered to Ling Han yet. If his battle prowess had been enough to crush Ling Han, would Ling Han still have had the face to ask for the sword to be given back? The problem was, he had actually been defeated by Ling Han. That being the case, he could only swallow the huge loss of having a leg cut off. Fortunately, regrowing severed limbs wasn't anything too difficult for those who had reached the immortal level. One wouldn't be crippled as long as their life force remained uninjured. Pa! Ling Han slapped Yang Shuang across the face, and said balefully, "Did you think this matter would end so easily? I was merely punishing you for stealing my sword just then. Now, I'm helping Brother Jean vent his anger." Pa! He continued to slap Yang Shuang across the face. Pu. Yang Shuang's teeth were all knocked out, and his face was caked with blood. It was a truly devastating sight. Enough. A youth dashed over at this moment, his face filled with intense displeasure. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.